Howdy, y'all. Professor Parks here. Don't worry, I still have my PhD. I'm just going for a bit of a rebrand, and I'm currently working out exactly what that means. So, but I still do content on astronomy, science skepticism, or rather science misinformation, and mental health. Normally, I am going to be focusing most of my attention on the science miscommunication or science misinformation when dealing with things related to young Earth creationism and so forth. But a friend of mine, Eric, decided to send me a couple of different videos about this Dr. Stephen Young, who is a flat earther amongst other things. And yeah, I couldn't resist. I couldn't help but look at it. No, I am not going to be rebranding myself as a geocentrist. No, sadly, that is not going to actually be the case. So where was I going? Oh, pardon me. The reason why I was late is because I was looking up, as you do, on Amazon, the textbook on spherical astronomy by W.M. Smart. And holy crow, it is $100. And only $98 on Kindle. So $100 paperback, $98 Kindle. What the? Obviously, I can get it used, but that is beside the point. So, howdy, Stephanie, Coco, Clive. How are y'all doing? Howdy, Triceratops, YECs, meet giant planetary sinkhole, Conrad. Howdy, I don't think I've seen you around. And of course, howdy, Judy. I think she's here as well. And Al. So, who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about that dude, Dr. Stephen Young. And he apparently got his PhD in physics. And his dissertation is entitled, I know you can't really read that, but Probing Nuclear Halos with Pion Proto-Production. And he did it, he wrote this in 2004, and he graduated from the University of Physics, or the Department of Physics at the University of Surrey. So this is all on you, Brits. You can claim this one. So, Conrad equals Darnock. Okay, yes, I have. Howdy, Conrad. We have spoken a couple of times. I will actually be on Conrad's podcast. I think we rescheduled it for this Saturday, and we'll be talking about light. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be talking about him, Dr. Stephen Young, who, again, among other things, believes that the Earth is flat. But also, among other things, he believes in that atoms don't exist, that alchemy is a what's viable academic field of study. He also, for Stephanie, from my understanding, also believes astrology is a valid academic endeavor. And so, what did I want to do here? That's not what I wanted to do. That? Yes. So specifically what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be closing that, and I'm going to be talking about, sorry, I don't know who that is. Oh, I know who that is. Someone's trying to call me. You disown him? Yeah. So we're going to listen to an interview between him and a woman, Dr. Kelly Brogan. She is a MD. Apparently she got her degree from, I think it's Cornell. I think she got her degree from Cornell Medical School in psychiatry. She actually graduated MIT with a bachelor's degree in neuroscience. So I don't know what the fuck happened with these two, but here we go. So this is an interview between her and him. So I'm going to play you her intro. So she is this is part of a podcast, I guess, called, well, I'll just play it. Let me know if you can hear it.
I'm Dr. Kelly Brogan. You may know me as a New York Times bestselling author of a book with an exploding pill on the cover, renegade psychiatrist, pole dancer, or honorary member of the Disinformation Dozen. What can I say? I'm a born provocateur. I've spent most of my recent life exposing deceptions, connecting dots, and discovering the secret places my inner victim is still waiting to be liberated. And now, I feel called to help you reclaim all of your parts, your health, your sexuality, your power, and your expression, so that you can finally truly own yourself. I want to ignite in you that inner knowing and the pulsing vitality that lives beneath your disempowerment, disconnection, and resentment, so that you can audaciously, courageously, and playfully alchemize your struggle into the specific pleasure of who you are. This is Reclamation Radio. Hi, and welcome back.
So that is Kelly Brogan. This is Reclamation Radio, and she is a part of the Disinformation Dozen, which is a rabbit hole I don't want to go down, but of course I will be going down. And it's funny you should just mention that, Clive, because I was going to say that intro was had a whole lot of buzzwords associated with Woo. I am going to leave talking about her. Oh, and yeah, that's actually another conversation that I wouldn't mind having with other people, is her use of sexuality in promoting sort of academic thought or scientific thought. You know, basically her use of sexuality in this context. Is it appropriate? Is it not? Particularly in the context of how academics, professional astronomers, and physicists have felt that they've been objectified. So definitely want to have that conversation later. But I was planning on allowing Maya Atkinson and Tapioca Weasel, who do Bad Science Sundays, find Maya's channel and subscribe to it. I was going to leave her to them, but I wanted to tackle what he had to say. What? She was on Witsit? Like, Witsit was actually speaking to her live, or was he commenting on a video of hers, or what was going on? So I'm going to basically move around here a little bit. And I think it's right about here where he talks about his academic journey.
Oh, yeah, thanks. That's a great introduction and a great place to start. So this, I mean, it's a quote from the Bible, which says, ye shall know them by their fruits. That's it. Ye shall know them by their fruits, which is a quote from Jesus, I think. And, it's essentially telling that you can know about something, you can know something is good or bad by what it produces. And, of course, when you first come into academia as a student and you're learning all these subjects of...
Talk about that. One, because I don't want to get a copyright strike, so I want to make sure that my lovely dulcet tones are interweaved with this. That's not exactly what that quote is really talking about, although it is applicable in this case because he is going to make the claims that effectively the fields of astronomy, relativity, quantum mechanics do not actually, and quantum mechanics, and there's another one, nuclear physics, basically. These do not actually produce fruitful enterprises. Basically, there is nothing from a technological standpoint that comes out of these. Nothing that is relevant or useful to humanity. And so, but what the quote actually really means is you shall know someone by their actions, essentially. It's the whole, if someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Of course, you don't really know what is being produced from all this knowledge. You're just learning the knowledge in good faith that it will be useful to do things with in the future. You're learning something that the world needs and, something that can help you become successful and so on. But when I left with my PhD in theoretical physics, I found it very hard to find any meaningful work related to what I'd been studying. It was mainly just, banking and military, essentially. Banks are the biggest employers of physics PhDs, are like investment banks and stuff like that, which...
Okay, so this immediately rose a red flag to me, because I don't know how it's in the UK, but I do know how it works in the US. Once you get a PhD in physics or astronomy, you have effectively 3 paths that you can go down. You can do pure research, and that can be done, pure research. That can either be done at a observatory or some kind of like JPL or Goddard or some kind of NASA institute. Or if you are physics, I would imagine that you have Fermilab and other such places like that. So you can go into pure research if you want. You can go the more traditional teacher professorship route. You can work with a university and be hired on as either a tenure track professor, which means that you're splitting your time between active research and teaching. Adjacent to that, you could also do what I do, which is you can become term faculty and you are primarily interested in instruction. And then the third one, which is what he's talking about, is going into industry. And, again, with physics and astronomy, depending on what you're doing, you can get into there are a number of different sort of bits of industry you can get into, such as if you have built instruments during your time as an astronomer, you can go to a corporation or a company that builds instruments and you can work for them. This thing about investment bankers, I do have an anecdotal story about this. One of the guys that I worked with when I was in grad school, he was the grad student of one of my advisors. Anyway, I knew this dude, and he got out of the astronomy game once he got his PhD, and he worked for a bank because, pun intended, he wanted to make bank, because academia don't pay all that great, even if you go into pure research. But banks sure as shit do. Now, the thing is, what he says here is he only fixates on the industry part, and he doesn't really talk, and it's not really even physics industry. He's talking simply about banks and military. So, yeah, effectively, the only thing that I can think about is that he has some certain definition of meaningful, which is different than mine. Because usually you get a postdoc, or typically you get a postdoc. Basically, you do a research position after you get your PhD. That's the route that I took. So, is he saying that there are effectively no job opportunities for theoretical physicists? And so he went to he had to go to the military or banks in order to find a job, which I suppose is likely. I mean, I don't know exactly what the job market looks like for quantum physics. In astronomy, then particularly in certain niches of astronomy, the job market is pretty anemic. But if you're good enough, or if you've networked well enough, then you can get jobs. I mean, obviously, people are getting jobs with PhDs. So this just sent up a red flag as to, what do you mean you couldn't get a meaningful job outside the military or banks? So, but I don't want to career shame him in any way. It was a red flag.
When you've been learning about like atoms and nuclei and stuff, the idea of like going and working for a bank is just like really boring. And so I didn't want to do that. And so I was unemployed for 6 months after the PhD, and I tried applying to all kinds of employers, and then ended up getting a job at a technical consultancy working for banks in the end. But so then as the years went on, so it's been
Yeah, again, another anecdotal story that I have is a colleague of mine when I was coming up as a grad student, who Brian Kloppenberg. He is now actually the CEO of the American Astronomical, the AAVSO, the Association of American Variable Star Observers. He actually left once he got his PhD and went into a computer startup, again, because of money. But as often startups don't really last all that long, he transitioned back into astronomy. So him talking about going into things outside of his field, that makes sense. But it is, again, it's more of these are the only opportunities that he's talking about.
Over 20 years now since I finished the PhD, you know, I kept abreast of what's happening. I kept studying, kept learning. As I got more distant from academia, I started to notice that, you know, nothing's really coming from it. You know, there's all this knowledge that's talked about, but what's actually produced by it, you know, what is made from it, is there any benefits or applications to humanity? And, you know, in the case of the physics I was studying, like the nuclear and quantum and gravity and relativity and all these, I increasingly found that there were no applications of them. Now, in the case...
He's about to get into this, but I just want to put this out there. This man who has a degree, has a PhD in theoretical physics, just said there are no practical applications for the studies in gravity, in relativity, quantum mechanics, and nuclear physics. I want you to let that sink in for a second, that he is claiming that there are no practical applications of any of those topics. I'm pretty sure many people would like to have a word with this gentleman. I think the GPS, nuclear reactors, and the military would actually like to have our first in line in dealing with this. I think PhD Tony would also like a word with this gentleman, and so would his clients.
Of quantum and atomic physics, there are said to be a number of applications, the atomic bomb being one of them, but other things...
Like how he goes to the first application that is helpful for humanity, nukes. I think he might actually be American. I think he's just faking it. I think the accent is a psyop. He may actually be American.
Things like the electron microscope or MRI scanners or things like this, they're said to be, you know, things that came about because of our knowledge of atoms and because of our knowledge of quantum physics. But as I looked into all these alleged applications of quantum physics, I found that they were easily explained just in engineering terms. And in fact, they're just products of engineering.
So, the nuclear weapons, or let's go with something a little less American, and let's go with an electron microscope, for example. Yes, an electron microscope was a product of engineering because it's a piece of equipment. However, the process via which the electron microscope operates was first determined through physics. Any sort of application of any sort of pure science, pure scientific research, is going to be engineering by default. All of it. Engineering is not some kind of standalone discipline. Engineering does not produce or does not develop ideas which can then be made applicable into equipment. So, yeah. So apparently, yeah. So, and what I also like is, and this is going to come into play a little bit later, he makes the claim that all of these devices can be better explained through engineering, as if it needs to, the validity of something, the validity of relativity or any scientific endeavor is in how it's presented. Essentially, if you cannot understand it, it is not valid. It is not valid.
Electromagnetic engineering, you know, technology has gotten better and better because people are doing it over and over again, and repetition is like the mother of invention, right? So the more you do work repeatedly, you think of better ways to do it more efficiently and, faster and smaller and all the.
So, yeah, this is kind of in line with how I think a theoretical physicist looks at engineering. I'm fairly confident, not an engineer, but fairly confident that is not how engineering works. You cannot, he's basically saying if a guy builds a car enough times, he can start building a smaller car. He can start figuring out how to miniaturize the parts of the car. I don't believe that is actually the case. But again, not an engineer. So maybe if there's an engineer in the chat, they can enlighten me. If there's an engineer who watches this later, please put in your comments and tell me if what he just said is actually how engineering works, or how technology evolves, particularly in the terms of miniaturization, getting, say, a computer from a large room full of racks to something as small as my phone on my desk.
This kind of thing. So technology, all of it is born from engineering, and I found wasn't really an application of atomic physics or so on. And then, there's various other theories like this as well. So that's how I started to look at it. I realized that there is all this good science that you can do, classical physics, which is the classical physics is the root of all like technology and engineering and software and all this kind of stuff. But there's this whole new physics, which most of which came about in the last century, and some of it, as far back as Newton, say. But really, in the last few hundred years, there's a new type of physics which has taken over all physics, programming. Really, you don't see people talking much about classical physics.
New kind of physics taking over the old kind of physics, taking over science programming. These to me are deliberately chosen targeted words, which underline his thinking as to how things are moving forward, or what is behind the things that are moving us forward, rather. Howdy, Olo.
But they're always talking about atoms and black holes and gravity and all this stuff, right? And I was sucked into that,
So he says they talk about atoms and black holes and what have you. Who exactly is they? If you're talking about science communication, sure. But as I've mentioned many times before, science communication is only interested in whiz-bang sorts of things. It's only interested in what can drive clicks to their website from the average person. The average person is not going to be all that fascinated by advances in gravimeters or advances in classical mechanics or the applications thereof of classical mechanics, because it's stuff they've seen before. Now, a black hole, that's exotic. That's, this stuff of science fiction. People are going to be interested in learning about that. So I'm curious when he says that all he hears about, or all that we do, is black holes and atoms, or whatever he just said. Is he actually looking at the academic field, or is he talking about what he is seeing on his news feed? So, yeah.
When I got to university, I was like, "Oh, this is where it's at. In new physics, it's this is our future." But yeah, as the years have gone on, I've just found that it's just not. It's not standing up to scrutiny, and it's not produced anything good for humanity.
So I want to get into this.
So yeah, again, just to recap. Relativity, studies of gravity, relativity, quantum mechanics, and atomic physics, or nuclear physics, has not produced any applications that are relevant to the success of humanity. Check.
This in a little bit, but one of the most delightful aspects of reading this book was resolving.
Oh yeah, apparently he wrote a book, which I haven't been I haven't had the time to really look into what the book is.
The chronic annoyance that I have felt with the New Age and all of these different spiritual teachers referencing quantum physics and referencing all of these, space holder terms that really mean almost nothing. Like, you could use descriptive language instead of invoking these scientific theories. But it's like they borrow things like quantum entanglement or different aspects of, the vernacular of quantum.
Yes, I also have a problem with this. So she and I actually have a bit of common ground, which is, weird. I also have a problem with woo peddlers who are apparently spiritual healers and so forth, who cherry pick scientific sounding words in order to justify or to back up the veracity of their claims. This is also the same problem I have with young Earth creationists, is that they use science when it is applicable to their point, and whenever science is contradictory to their suppositions, then they either have to distort it or they have to get rid of it. But yes, it does drive me crazy particularly when people who are not scientists like to pick and choose different technical sounding words in order to give their product or their methodology more authority, as it were.
Quantum physics to substantiate their, spiritual teachings and to validate, right? So we know, you and I, because I didn't mention this, but you are in a very small, trusted circle of allies that I call on to help me interpret reality, right? So in our little circle of...
So she has chosen a inner cabal, if you will allow, inner cabal to help her interpret reality. She doesn't go to academics, or she doesn't go to all academia. She doesn't go to mainstream science. What this sounds like is she finds academics that seem to agree with her point of view, at least on the surface, and then strictly listens to those people. That is what we call confirmation bias, is looking for sources that you feel or you think are going to validate your own positions and then use them for future validations. This is not how science is done. Now, again, I'm not claiming that she is doing science, but I'm just using this as an example of what confirmation looks like in practice, is when you pick and choose the people that you listen to based on whether or not you feel that they are going to validate your preconceived notions, but rather than challenge them. That is a problem. And that is where you get echo chambers, and that is where you get, you start building these larger and larger communities of misinformation.
Colleagues, we talk about scientism and the real...
There's that word again, scientism.
Religion of science and the way...
The religion of science. Hold on. Apparently I stopped it too far, or too quickly.
Vernacular of quantum physics to substantiate their, spiritual teachings and to
Sadly,
validate.
I have not cleaned my chakras lately.
We know, you and I, because I didn't mention this, but you are in a very small, trusted circle of allies that I call on to help me interpret reality, right? So
I got me as a young child, and
sorry about that.
I was here. So the first...
I was going to say, I was wondering whether or not Witsit was a part of her inner circle. Now, I'm not going to go back because I think this is a very good point, but again, in case you missed it, effectively, she used the word scientism. She then also claimed that that science was a religion. She is now going to go into, I believe, 5 fundamentals of scientism. Or at least, she is going to she's going to list the 5 fundamentals of scientism as reported in his book.
Is atomism, right? So things like atomic, nuclear, quantum, and particle physics. The second is gravity, things that reference like Newton and Einstein and Hawking. The third is heliocentrism. So a lot of people may have never even heard that term. So it's sun centrism, right? So this solar system model. So the invocation of names like Copernicus and Galileo. I think of like that Indigo Girls song I used to sing all the time, like in high school. Oh my God, so funny how penetrant these things are. Number 4 is evolution. So the reference to Darwin. And the 5th, of course, is where, I've spent a lot of my recent years, is germ theory. So Pasteur and, this concept that germs cause, or these invisible particles, like viruses cause disease. So in those 5 arenas, you have connected some pretty important dots around.
Okay, so again, just to be clear about this, is that he is stating that atomic theory as we know it, quantum mechanics as we know it, ain't a thing. Gravity isn't a thing. The heliocentric model ain't a thing. Now, I've got a small bone to pick, and this is why I have changed, not recently, but I've changed my profile pic. Johannes Kepler does not get any love. He gets no respect. And I find that to be problematic. They talk about the Copernican system and all this, and she's like, Copernicus and Galileo. I'm like, what about my man Kepler? That's what it's all about now. Planetary laws, yo. That's Kepler. That's Johann. So if you're a flat earther out there, please give my man some love and mention Kepler rather than Copernicus, because really it's all about Kepler now. So evolution is also not a thing. And what was the last one? Germ theory. Yeah. So Stephanie believes that there is such a thing as scientism versus actual science. That is definitely scientism, same as science dogma, same as accepted unproved theories. All right, well, that's a different conversation, but than from what this is. But I would be at some point interested to hear you expound on that.
And, the deception that has led to our being arrested in victim consciousness and powerlessness and a kind of dependency on these authorities who are, really hand waving, right? So who are fabricating this fruitless science, right?
All right. So this I found to be fairly interesting because Kepler stole from Brahe. He didn't actually steal from Brahe. Kepler stole from Brahe's estate. He actually stole Kepler's data after Brahe died because he wasn't a big fan of probate, apparently. In terms of what Kepler, in terms of science or scientific thought or anything of that nature, Kepler certainly did not steal from Brahe. Kepler had to ultimately abandon Brahe's initial ideas based on Brahe's own work. It's actually a very, very cool story. But if you listen to this, she says that scientism, particularly I think because germ theory, because that is what she is most interested in, it emphasizes victimhood, or it somehow takes away from a person's identity, and it requires people to, you know what, I'm going to replay that. I don't want to misspeak.
It's sun centrism, right? So that, this concept that germs cause, or these invisible particles, like viruses cause disease. So in those 5 arenas, you have connected some pretty important dots around.
which seems to me to be special knowledge, what is it? Appeal to special knowledge.
And, the deception that has led to our being arrested in victim consciousness and powerlessness and a kind of dependency on these authorities who.
So things like evolution, things like germ theory, things like heliocentric model, these are deceptions that are perpetuated in order to make the layperson basically dependent upon experts. She also claims that we hand wave. Well, there's a reason why we hand wave, is because we are trying to communicate fairly, in a lot of places, we're trying to communicate fairly complex ideas to people who do not have the training to fully understand those ideas. I am not saying that these people are dumb. I'm not saying that lay people are dumb or stupid in any way. All I'm saying is that when you start talking, particularly when you start talking about quantum mechanics, particularly when you start talking about relativity, and for myself, when you basically talk about anything dealing with biology, those are far more complex than the average person may realize. And so it is quite often quite typical for us to hand wave, to talk about these concepts through analogies, which are imperfect, simply to be able to get the points across. And so what I've noticed among flat earthers or such is that they will look into it just a little bit, just enough to recognize that what people are saying, what the communicators are saying, isn't actually true, but they don't look deep enough to understand the nuance, to understand what is true, and even understand why it is that science communicators communicate in the way that they do. So she is framing this in such a way as to paint the experts as being liars and deceivers who are bent on making the populace dependent upon them. And that is very dangerous, because that is not what science is attempting to do. There are, I find this many, many times where science skeptics, flat earthers, young earth creationists, well, not so much with young earth creationists, but evangelicals, that sort of thing, they'll label us as scientists as trying to do something which we're not, hiding God, being satanic, being a Freemason, here basically trying to control people through science. That's not what science does. Now, there is a separate issue when it comes to things like the pandemic, but that's not really the science so much as to how the governments decided to act upon that science. Granted, they were taking advice from the scientists. But again, that's ultimately up to the government as to how they go about implementing that sort of thing. Now, but that is an entirely different subject, which I don't want to get into here. One, because I'm fairly ignorant of how the medical community comes to its consensus, things of that nature. But I definitely wanted to highlight that she is painting a picture that mainstream science, particularly in the realms of germ theory, evolution, heliocentrism, and atomic physics, are lying in order to make people dependent upon them, which is definitively not the case.
Who are, really hand waving, right? So who are fabricating this fruitless science, right? This science that can't.
Again, it's easy to call it fruitless if you believe it to be a lie. It isn't fruitless. We have viable vaccines because of biomedical research. We have, we have nuclear reactors. We have nuclear energy because of atomic nuclear physics. not just because of engineering. We needed to know how radioactive elements decay in order to figure out how to build a machine which would generate power from that decay. So, yeah, calling it fruitless is deceptive, if I may use a word from her vocabulary.
Can't be necessarily seen with the naked eye, and instead has to be rendered through mathematical equations, and assumption.
And assumptions. Here again, we see yet another common refrain from Flat Earth is it can't be true because we can't see it and we can only describe it mathematically. Which really translates into, I don't understand the math, so therefore it's not real. Which I'm sorry, that's not how anything works. There are many things that I don't understand, biology being one of them. But I'm not going to be so audacious as to say because I don't understand how developmental or evolutionary biology works, that it's bunk, that it's just complete garbage because I cannot see it with my own eyes, and I don't understand the specific processes that are involved in that theory. It's a matter of trust. I trust the biologists to know what they're talking about, and so I trust what they have to say on that particular subject. So this notion that science can only be done by those who can see the phenomenon, manipulate the phenomenon, and then that math is not necessary, clearly do not understand what science actually is and how science is actually done.
So let's start with this concept of the atomic age, because the reference even to, nuclear bombs and weapons, it's so reflexively assumed that that's a real risk, right? That is something, we could just push a button and be gone, right? By so many colloquially that it's amazing to imagine we walk this plane with that, when you believe that, with that white noise of fear. And of course, I think that
when you believe that, so are you suggesting that the possibility of nuclear annihilation is not possible? Because I'm pretty sure India and Pakistan would like a word. Again, and that is very dangerous. So again, I don't want to assume, but it sounds to me, and folks in the audience could correct me, but it sounds to me as if she just said that nuclear weapons aren't a thing.
that's, what you and I have come to conclude is like, when you shift your beliefs around these things, you shed so many, of these deep existential worries. They just stop being relevant, right?
Yes. If you shove your head deep enough into the sand, then yeah, you can have a lot of existential relief. If you do not recognize that there are actually dangers in the universe, legitimate dangers in the universe, then yeah, I guess you can sleep real well. The problem with that is it doesn't get rid of those does not get rid of those threats that you refuse to believe actually exist. And two, it actually hampers your ability to respond to such a threat. Like, what is this woman going to do if, God forbid, the nukes start falling? Like, is she just going to say, nope, I don't believe that. Nope, I'm not believing that bomb is falling. Nope, that thing's not real. I'm just gonna not believe it. When a pandemic runs through, is she just going, and people, start getting sick, ER start filling up, people start dying, is she just going to say, wrong, fake news? Like, if you want to bury your head in the sand so deeply that you just simply ignore that life is there are dangers in life, then sure, you can have more relief. You can feel better about things. That is, particularly coming from a psychiatrist, that is anathema to what modern psychology has to say is that one, we have to realize, we have to accept the realities in which we are living in and cope with them as we see them. We do not simply invent a reality that is most convenient for our own way of thinking. That is maladaptive.
Right. So, but the way that you've talked about like electrons and protons and neutrons and this concept of atomism and how it then tracks forward into our perspectives on the solar system and our perspectives on so much of what we understand about reality really comes in sharp contrast to your specific training. So maybe we can start there and, you know, just start to introduce people to this idea of the atom as a fallacy and everything that's come from that.
Yeah, I suppose I did when I was at university, I did one module on philosophy of science, you know, as well as all the science stuff. I did one module in the philosophy department, and I was interested in the philosophical side of things. And there was a lot of philosophical stuff comes out from quantum mechanics and relativity and stuff. So I did a bit of that at university. But then when I left, I mean, I feel like that was almost like the most useful part, you know, because it took me like outside of the theories and helped me to kind of like look at them and what they mean and understand that every theory has a corresponding philosophy. You know, if it doesn't have a practice, like...
No. Every theory can birth a philosophical thought. You can look at what the science is telling us and then try to figure out from a philosophical point of view what the meaning of that is in various circumstances, such as the Big Bang Theory. Now we have this idea, you can have this idea that the universe had some kind of absolute beginning. That's not exactly, the Big Bang Theory is not saying this absolutely, but one interpretation of the theory is that the universe has a definitive beginning and then will have this unending future. And so you can then look at, from a philosophical standpoint, what the fuck does that mean to us? Like, what does it mean to have a universe, have non-existence prior to the universe? What does it mean to have a universe that never ends, that constantly expands and ultimately will be so diffuse that it will be in some, again, in some theories or some ideas, it will be completely homogeneous. It'll have complete homogeneity, that no two portions are going to be different from one another. You can take those ideas from science and you can create philosophical thought from them. But it is not that we have philosophical thought, which then drives the science. I may be putting words in his mouth. This might be a straw man, but I just want to make clear that if someone out there is watching this, that is not, if you have that interpretation, that is not what is happening. Philosophy does not drive science. Data does. I have said many times that having a worldview, be it theological or philosophical, and allowing that worldview to dictate or drive or direct your thoughts or your interpretation of science is inappropriate.
Like, I mean, like music has a practice, you know, music is a theory, and every part of music theory has a corresponding practice, something you can do and apply. But if it's a theory that doesn't have a practice, it's usually, it's an encoded philosophy or like a worldview or a creed, you might say, rather than philosophy.
It is not. So again, relativity does not have a creed. It does not have tenets at which that I have to follow. It is a description of physical phenomenon. So if I want to understand them, if I want to understand something new, then I look to it under a relativistic worldview. Maybe I just contradicted myself. Framework. You use a relativistic framework in order to do that. However, one of the things that makes it different from the word creed is that creed would indicate a religious dogmatic viewpoint. Those do not change or are very, very difficult to change. However, from science, science again is data driven. It is not driven by the worldview. It is driven by data. And when that data tells us that our current framework is wrong or incomplete, we then adapt to it. It's not a quick process. In many cases, it's really not a quick process. but it is a process. And to just dismiss it like this, again, is irresponsible and is a false characterization of modern science as some kind of religious orthodoxy.
It's more like a creed, like a way of a system of belief. And with the atomism, so atomism goes way back. So they say to Greek times, like Democritus, they say was the founder of atomism. Recently,
They say, as in you don't believe them?
I learned that like none of Democritus's original works or writings exist. So
So no, you don't believe them. They just say that Democritus said this, that they somehow decided to promote atomism and put his name onto it as some kind of authority figure to it. Okay. I'm curious to know whether or not who he is going to claim they is.
So thinking he might even be just made up to like take the fall for this. I'm not sure, but no, a lot has been written about ancient Greek atomists, and the thing is, they were, you know, if you think about what they're actually proposing, is that everything in the universe is made from these indivisible atoms. The word atom meaning indivisible, and from that, then, you know, it poses a problem because it's a rejection of religion and God and all that for a start. You know, you're proposing a new model of the cosmos, and so that.
Logic me this, Batman. How is an indivisible particle? Again, my memory sucks. I want to use the exact word.
Meaning indivisible. And from that, then, you know, it poses a problem because it's a rejection of religion. And
how does an indivisible particle reject the existence of God? Riddle me that. I don't see the difference between the two of them, unless you're going to give me some kind of stupid logical argument of, oh, it's indivisible, so an all-powerful God can't split fuck off if that's your argument. How is this? Sorry, I have told myself to be less salty about these sorts of things, but how is the identification of a particle which physics tells us is indivisible, how does that have anything to do with God? That sounds like a you problem. That sounds like you want some kind of worldview to be proposed by your science, and that is not what science does. So stop it. Just take the data as it is. And then on the weekends, light up the bong and go nuts with those cronuts. Sober up and come back to the office and actually do science.
And God and all that for a start. You know, you're proposing a new model of the cosmos. And so, well,
a new model of the cosmos as opposed to the Bible? Because, yeah, the Bible has whole bunches to say about how things get put together. God did it. Awesome.
The atomists were associated with deep hedonism, basically. They were really into hedonism, and the atomic way of looking at things sort of rejected morality. And
yeah, because I don't know about y'all, but hearing about quarks, whoo, that really gets the captain saluting. Oh my God, don't get me on gauge bosons. Whoo, whoo, oh my God. Oh, heavens to Betsy. I don't know. Atomists were hedonists. And so, okay, sure. I've also heard the same, that they basically, they like to party. But again, that's their philosophy. And then there is physics. Those two things, I feel like Trump, those two things are not connected. And if you are connecting them, that is a you problem. And it seems like, if I may use the thing that I absolutely hate, it seems like you're using a poisoning the well fallacy. That basically you're looking at the people who are purportedly the ones who came up with this idea. You think they are morally wrong, and so therefore anything that they said about anything else is in fact wrong. And that is how nothing works. So, yeah.
And there is this idea that, like, if there's no God and it's all just atoms floating around in space, then where does goodness come from? And like they believed, well, goodness came from the bumping of atoms, right? Because if atoms are separated in space, they're lonely, they're isolated, and that's not good. But when they come together, and touch, that's good. So
that's bullshit. Again, I've read a little bit about the evolution of scientific thought, including atomism. In none of my readings have I read that they thought it was good, that goodness came from quarks fucking. Nowhere in there, nowhere in my reading have I read that somehow the copulation of atoms is in fact the good basis for goodness. Citation needed. Again, even if they did think that charity comes from the bondage, the S&M of a proton and an electron, and that's where we get the moral concept of charity, even if that is correct, and they thought that does not make it right. Again, that is their worldview. It does, and that is their worldview, and their worldview can be right or wrong. The physics is completely separate from that. And so them being wrong on their worldview does not make, by connection, their physics wrong or their ideas of physics wrong. So, yeah.
So it was associated with hedonism and lack of like decency and moral principles and so on, like abandoning morality and decency and everything. So they don't teach you that in physics class, of course, but
of course not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, if you looked into it and you saw how the neutrinos dress, you would immediately know that this is all bullshit because of they shouldn't be going out like that.
But, that has been written about a lot. This was kind of like the philosophy behind atomism. Yeah, and then from that, I started to see how it does create this, there's this materialism, right? This idea that you're just this lone, atom or collection of atoms that's just like come together. And of course, on this lonely planet and everything. And the atomic theory, we can talk about alchemy a bit soon as well, I guess, but the atomic theory is actually directly opposed to alchemy, the ancient science of alchemy, which says that everything is made from ether. And there's this like diametrically opposing worldview between everything being made from ether or everything being made from atoms. When you consider everything being made from atoms, it's a materialistic worldview in which everything is separate. But when you talk about ether, it's a holistic worldview where everything is connected and part of one single substance.
So that is your interpretation of both of those ideas. When you look at atomism, if you actually look at, particularly if you look at it in the cosmological standpoint, is that that atoms, that quarks, leptons, fermions, that sort of thing, they are condensates of a energy field that originated in the beginning of the universe. I don't know about you, but that certainly sounds like connectedness. That essentially we are all condensed individual pieces of matter from a larger collective whole, which is the universe itself. I can't think of a better way of saying that we are all in fact connected to the universe. Now, do I believe that? No. But can I see that as some kind of legitimate stoned theory? Sure. So this idea that, because ether is holistic, that means God, whereas atoms mean individual materialism, that means not God, that's a you problem. That is your interpretation. That is not what the science says. When you open up a textbook, when I talk about, we recall from elementary optics that when a ray of light passes into a denser medium, that God doesn't exist. That's not what this says. That's not what any of it says. This is a you problem.
Which is more in line with the religious view of things, that we're all part of one, one thing or one creator or universe or so on. So yeah, so the atomism, even though it's 2,500 years old as an idea or whatever, it only really came to the forefront of physics in the last 100, 150 years or so, and now physics education is all about atoms. But
that's because the data says it is. Because we can make applications, we have practical applications based on the idea that you have atoms. Solar cells. I would really like to know how this dude thinks solar cells work. Solar cell is when you have photoionization of electrons, which is an atom. So how do you have photoionization of ether?
As I say, is anyone actually working with atoms? Is anyone actually using them or building anything with atoms?
Yes.
I don't believe so. I've been looking for
I don't care.
a long, long time to see if anyone...
Then your Google foo sucks. If you've been looking for a really long time, then you don't know how to look. Or you are deliberately closing your eyes as you're looking around.
is actually using atoms, for anything. But I think they just exist on the blackboard, in the textbooks.
And so these concepts that are, again, like colloquially
Again, not in atomic physics, not in nuclear physics, but I'm fairly confident I have seen where physicists have been able to stitch atoms together to make smiley faces. I'm pretty sure we can make things with individual atoms. Nanotechnology is in line with this. So, liar, liar, pants on fire.
penetrant, like electrons and protons, this like dark matter, sort of idea, the phenomenology of the
Anyway.
impact of the observer. And, it's funny to me that totally non-scientifically oriented folks are like talking about these experiments, that have theoretically been done in the realm of quantum physics to substantiate a lot.
Theoretically been done. So you're saying they haven't been done? So effectively, those people who are saying that they have done experiments in the lab which validate quantum mechanical principles, you're basically saying they're lying, which then leads into why they are lying, which then leads into, is there some external force making them lie? So, yeah.
A lot of esoteric concepts. And so what you're saying is that based on your research, you haven't come to understand them as having ever been actually substantiated, actually
Because that is a you problem.
proven, and they're just ideas.
Yeah, exactly. So, the whole thing with, modern atomism, which would be quantum physics, is this wave-particle thing where they say, oh, the particle is sometimes a wave and the wave is sometimes a particle, and they can do all this, crazy stuff. And, they call it a paradox. And, for me, when I started getting into alchemy, which, again, we, just views the world as consisting of 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, which I found can explain everything. You can explain everything in terms of earth, air, fire, and water, like no exceptions. So the wave...
Okay. Okay, Avatar Man. Which tribe do you belong to? First off, personally, I am fond of fire, but if you got to be water, you got to be water. You know where the 4 elements came from? Greeks, specifically Aristotle. Aristotle was the biggest proponent of the idea that all of the material world was created from 4 elements: air, water, earth, and whatever. Fire. Memory, bad. He also actually referred to the 5th element, which is aether, which he believed to be what separates the subluminal world from the superluminal world, meaning that anything from the moon lower was composed of 4 elements: air, wind, or air, water, earth, and fire. and that anything beyond that was perfect, was celestial, and was comprised of ether. And so that was his worldview, and then he made everything else, all of his physics, work within that worldview. Again, this is counter to how science is actually done. And this statement that you can explain all things by understanding that the universe is comprised of only four elements. I mean, he's not even including ether into this. The four elements. What's ether? How do you get ether from those four elements? Because apparently is something you agree with. How do you get plasma? Are you telling me that plasma is some kind of fire or some kind of combination between fire and air? I just, what? And yes, that is truth.
If particle duality just goes away because there's no particles, it's just fire. Like the light is just a wave, a light wave, fire. And the paradox was because...
So fire is a light wave. Okay.
They were believing everything to be made from these little particles, right? So that's what introduced the paradox and made all these crazy things happen, is because they are believing that the fundamental reality is the particle in those experiments. But actually, I would say it's just light waves, fire.
Our world is so
particles are just light waves, which are just fire. So where is air? Where is earth? What? Skipping ahead.
Atomic theory. One of the great implications is that the splitting of the atom and these nuclear weapons are a hoax, right? Are fictitious history, are a psychological operation, are somehow a deliberate misrepresentation of what actually has occurred. And we are not necessarily living in a world where we are under threat of nuclear weapons. Like, would you say that's one of the implications?
Yes, yeah. So there's obviously big bombs, and I say that in the book. I call them like BFBs, like big fucking bombs. Because as far as I understand, there's actually no limit to how big of a bomb you could make. If you have lots of money and lots of explosives, then you can make a bomb as big as you can imagine, right? So I'm not saying that there's no big bombs. The question, of course, is whether the word nuclear or atomic is actually justified.
So let me get this straight. Those missiles that are in the desert somewhere in silos with 1970s technology to operate them, those are just tipped with a whole lot of TNT or plastic explosive. I wonder if he's actually worked that out. Like, given the load, the energy that was put off by nuclear experiments in back in Oppenheimer's day, just how much TNT you would need in order to make that big fucking bomb. How much C4 would you need in order to make that big fucking bomb? Also, out of curiosity, I was not aware that you could get radiation sickness from standing next to a TNT explosion. So,
To put in front of the bomb when you say it's a nuclear bomb or whatever. I think when you really get to the core of atomic physics and like debunk the atomic model and so on, there's no reason to believe that the bombs are anything but an explosion, of chemicals. And there was a guy, I believe, Michael Pott.
Aside from radiation, also, again, and this is the thing that drives me up, and the fact that maybe it's because he's a theorist, I don't know. The fact of the matter is, if you are saying that these are not nuclear weapons, that these are conventional warheads, just really big, then unless you are saying that there is some secret explosive that the military has developed and we know nothing about, we know how much energy was produced or is produced through a nuclear weapon, through a nuclear explosion. That sadly has been done many, many times. We know how much energy is produced in each of these explosions. We also know how much energy is released per kilogram of TNT, of C4, of name your favorite, insert your favorite explosive chemical here as a function of weight or as a function of mass. So you can figure out just how massive that bomb has to be in order to determine how much, cannot speak. What I'm getting to is, in order to produce a 10 megaton explosion, you can figure out just how much TNT you would need in order to create that much energy. That gives you a weight limit. That gives you an amount of mass. Now, I have not done this experiment, but my intuition says that you would need a fuck ton, a actual fuck ton TNT in order to get a 10 megaton detonation. I think you need only half a fuck ton of C4 in order to do that. The implication of that is, can our modern rockets actually fly where they've been told where we've been told they can fly with such a payload? This is fairly simple math. I'm curious whether or not he's actually done this, and he can then substantiate the idea that no, we didn't nuke Hiroshima. We just sent a large fucking bomb to Hiroshima. And then again, as Clive probably beat me to it, there's this whole thing like that's called radiation fallout. We've seen it. We've measured it. We know it exists. So how do you explain radiation fallout from nuclear weapons, nuclear reactors? How do you explain that through the use of conventional warheads? Please tell me you are joking that Hiroshima was napalm. I've only seen videos of napalm. Napalm doesn't go boom. Napalm burns. Hiroshima went boom. Now again, I've never seen napalm in actual use. I've only seen videos of it, but it doesn't look like it goes boom. It looks like it goes burn. I know, I'm so very technical here. So he does say that. Oh, okay.
Palmer did a whole study into this and claimed that it was napalm and mustard gas that they used. Although, in the official story, they say it was uranium and plutonium. In the book, I debunk the official story and show that, uranium is not what we've been told either. And it doesn't require quantum or atomic physics to explain uranium. And, so
if I could have to read this guy's book,
it's like, yes, there was obviously an explosion and they can make big bombs, but is it right to call them nuclear or atomic, or are they just big fucking bombs? And I think, they're just big fucking bombs. And that's
again, how big of a bomb do you need to, how much napalm do you need to generate the same amount of energy that was recorded from Hiroshima? I'm pretty sure that's a Google search. You can figure out how much energy is released, I guess. And mustard gas? Is that what he is using to explain the radiation effects? The radiation fallout is mustard gas? Again, you can, no, I'm not paying this guy any money whatsoever. I'm not even buying this dude's book used if I can find it. I'm hoping that he expounds on this in a video somewhere, somehow. But anyway, I keep harping on this, because again, this is the first thing that you can do to check the math, is find out how much material you would need in order to create that explosion, and then figure out what that material weighs. And then from there, you can determine just how much, or whether or not our current ways of deploying ordnance can handle that kind of weight. So
That's the end of it. The nuclear atomic makes them sound scarier, right? It makes them sound like they have some, magical science forces behind them. But emotionally, who gives a crap? It's like, it's just a big bomb going to kill everybody. That's it. It's like, who cares?
So you think that nuclear makes it scary, but but the idea that it's just a big bomb that can kill everybody, that's okay. Is he high? Because if he is, I want me some of that.
Cares if it's atomic or nuclear? The idea that that's supposed to make a difference. It's just a scare tactic, I believe. And so we have this whole.
No, the scare tactic is that we have bombs which you claim to exist that can kill everyone. It's not the use of the word nuclear. It's not the use of the word atomic. It's the idea that we can destroy humanity 10 times over with the stockpile of big fucking bombs that you admit we have. What?
Atomic age, we're said to be in the atomic age, which started in 1945 or perhaps 1941, they say, the first experiment or whatever. But really it started with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. And then there was this idea that, okay, at any moment in any part of the world, some maniac could just destroy everything with a blast. And that's a really scary thing to take on, as a young child. And
so, is he denying that Hiroshima and Nagasaki existed? Because they're decimated. They were destroyed. So however you want to label it, those cities were destroyed basically in an instant. Unless you're refuting that. But even if you are, their existence demonstrates that at least the United States has the ability to decimate a city in fairly short order. How does that not scare you? I mean, if you're thinking of this as some sort of existential threat, how is it that is not scary to you? The eradication of cities, the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people by a government. I don't understand the logic here. Somebody, please help me out. How is it that the death of hundreds of thousands of people is scary if it's caused by a nuclear weapon, but isn't scary if it's just caused by a big fucking bomb?
Yeah, all those kids with the duck and cover drills, like duck under your desk and everything. But, I don't believe it at all. I don't think man has the power to destroy the world. And, I don't believe the bombs are nuclear or atomic in any way at all.
But you just said that they're big fucking bomb. What? So are you saying that there are really large bombs, but they don't actually have the power of... my brain is malfunctioning. It's seriously starting to short circuit because this is not quite making sense to me. Is this making sense to anybody else? Because if it is, please let me know in the comments or what have you, because it's not equating to me and it's making my brain hurt.
Tall. They're just big bombs,
So relatedly, I want to read a quote to bring us to the gravity and heliocentrism arena. So you write, heliocentrism and the globe theory go hand in hand. They are constructed from atomistic thinking and the theory of gravity. The model of the solar system and the model of the atom are nearly identical. Even the most inattentive physics student notices this. The only real difference between the solar system and the atom is the scale of object being theorized. One is unimaginably big and the other is unimaginably small. So
I'm going to let him take this, because if that truly is, I think she's actually reading from it. If that's what he... That's not what science says. That's not even what the Bohr model of the atom says. This guy is this guy did work in theoretical physics on atoms, and he is saying that the only difference between the solar system and an atom is that the solar system is just really, really big and that the atom is just really, really small. What? No. Okay. Let me see if he can clear this up.
So we we have extensively explored the whole cosmology piece, and I think the significance
Doubt.
of this, right? So you call it's the mother of all conspiracies about the mother, right? About the nature of this realm that we live in, and so many people, and I was one of these people initially too, when I encountered the concept of an alternative model of the solar system, shall we say. It was actually through David Wolf. The first time that I heard him, we were doing an interview together, and the first time that I heard him talking about, lines of sight that wouldn't be possible on a curved globe, I was like, who fucking cares?
Who is David Wolf?
Shut up. I'm like, why does it matter? And the why does it matter reflex is very strong, right? Because it doesn't seem to have implications whether we're on a flat, motionless plane or whether we're spinning in the middle of nowhere on a dead rock, having exploded from, some arbitrary moment of, Big Bang history. And
If that is your interpretation of the Big Bang, A, it's wrong, and B, that is a you problem.
the implications for and around believing in gravity and believing that we are the third rock, from the sun, are enormous, right? Metaphysically, spiritually, and I think both of us would attest to what gets lifted off of your spirit when you awaken to the manipulation around this. And
Okay, so this is new to me. I didn't realize that the existence of gravity denies the existence of God. I knew that, I guess it makes sense. The globe model and the heliocentric model, I've heard those are used to, deny God. But gravity? What did gravity do to you?
connection, right, between these two, even symbolically, which you're referencing in this quote, is extraordinary. So you talk about how to keep this inquiry simple, right? You talk about the proof of spinning, right? The proof that we're spinning, and the proof of curvature being like the points of entry if anyone is curious about exploring the nature of this realm and whether or not we are in a closed system that is motionless and, quote unquote flat, or whether it is the case that, we're spinning around and water is sticking to a ball that we are, scattered around. So if you could talk a little bit about like how you came upon this point of inquiry, because I know this is one of your first, in the journey, like it was a big point of entry for you. Yeah.
So this is where the name of the stream comes from. He is about to talk about how Earth curvature, the lack of Earth curvature apparently, and the idea that we are a spinning ball is what led him to these understandings of the denial of God and how atoms aren't a thing and so forth.
And the connection then to your training in nuclear physics and just how it all seems to be a similar story.
Yeah, so I mean, the flat Earth stuff was, probably the first stuff I was looking at that was criticizing physics. And so, I mean, if you look at like the 5 theories that you listed earlier, the flat Earth stuff is pretty much all aimed at gravity and heliocentrism. It's lumped into flat Earth content. It's all criticisms of the theory of gravity and the theory of heliocentrism, and that's it, and why shouldn't these theories be criticized? They're new theories, really just like let that sink in. Stuff I was looking at that was criticizing physics. And so, I mean, if you look at like the 5 theories that you listed earlier, the flat Earth stuff is pretty much all aimed at gravity and heliocentrism. It's lumped into flat Earth content. It's all criticisms of the theory of gravity and the theory of heliocentrism, and that's it, and why shouldn't these theories be criticized? They're new theories,
So gravity and heliocentrism are new theories. My boy Johannes Kepler and Isaac Newton would like a word. because they were contemporaries, I think. Kepler may have been older. Kepler and Galileo were contemporaries, and Newton came the generation after him. The life of me, I cannot. So we're talking early 1600s. So around the turn of the 1600s. So you're telling me that 400 plus years, that's new to you? You think that these are new theories because they're only 400 years old? Okay. You and I have way different ideas on what constitutes new. Man, if that's the case, I got a new car to sell you.
And at school, I feel like we should have been taught like the criticisms against these theories, but we're not. We're taught the theories as if they are settled long ago by an important group of, people. And you weren't at the meeting, but it's, they settled it, it's fine, just believe it, it's that kind of.
Okay. So, you aren't at the meeting. Why does a plumber get a seat at the table of talking about what is gravity? Does he have an expertise in this subject matter in order to contribute to its advancement? My guess is no, which is why he wasn't at the table. This democratization of science, or this idea that knowledge, particularly scientific knowledge, is a democracy, is very misguided and is harmful. Again, it seems to be, and unfortunately there are, I think, those out there who do state that if you don't understand physics, then you're stupid. That's not, again, what science says. If you get a whole bunch of people talking about, well, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Law comes to mind. If you're trying to figure out what constitutes a legal action, I would be of no help whatsoever in that room because I don't know the law. I don't know legal precedent. I don't know what constitutes exceptions to laws that are on the books. I don't know. So therefore, it is not appropriate to have me in a room where you're discussing whether or not a certain action is legal or not. Which I'm not talking about jury trials. I'm talking about whether or not a certain new law is consistent with other laws, matters of the law themselves that are the domain of lawyers and judges. Again, I'm not great at analogies, but that's basically where I'm going. You aren't at the table because you don't have the expertise. The reason why you don't have the expertise is because you, for whatever reason, and I'm talking about lay people, you, for whatever reason, felt that you had better shit to do. So, which is perfectly valid. You didn't want to become an astronomer. So, therefore, you don't need to learn. You don't need to know how gravity works on certain spatial scales. But because you didn't want to learn that, you don't get a seat at the fucking table. I didn't learn biology. I chose to actively avoid biology like the plague, which means that I do not get a seat at the table when it comes to saying whether or not evolution is correct or not. This is not about that people are too stupid, because this seems to be the underlying current of statements like this. You are not at the table. The underlying current is that the scientific establishment thinks you're too stupid to understand this, and so therefore you are excluded from from the conversation. No, you are excluded from the conversation because you do not have the expertise to discuss this. I do not go into my mechanic and say, "Hey, scooch over. Let's workshop about why my car doesn't turn over." I don't get a say in that because I know dick about cars or about how engines work. So again, I think that's even a better analogy, is I do not have the expectation that I should be basically in there with the mechanic trying to figure out how my car could go and work again, because I have nothing to contribute, because I chose not to pursue that as an expertise. That is of no value judgment. I am no less of a person because I don't know how a car works. I am no less of a person because I don't know how evolution works. You all are not lesser people because you don't understand how relativity works or what dark matter is. It's simply a matter of choice. And actually, that is why we need experts, because we are long past the days of polymaths. We are long past the days of being able to be experts in multiple fields of study. These fields of studies have grown so complex that we need to that a person's energy, in order to become an expert, has to become so focused on that particular subject as to basically block out everything else. You can have some kind of knowledge or maybe even working knowledge of adjacent subspecialties, but we need that sort of deep dive expertise in order to create these products that are helpful for humanity. And this rejection of it, this rejection of the idea that their rejection of expertise, of people with expertise, and even going so far as to claim that people with expertise are deliberately deceiving others for power, is wrong. And again, at best problematic, at worst, it's, how should I put this? Best problematic, at worst dangerous.
Thing. Yeah, so the challenges against gravity, I mean, it came quite easily to me, actually. I mean, gravity is a strange one. It is always a strange one in physics. It's like, they say it doesn't fit with quantum physics and stuff. And it went obviously from Newton's theory into Einstein's relativity. And, that's very complex. And, so the idea that gravity is just a theory was actually quite simple to accept. But then when you take that on and you really just like...
Did a theoretical physicist just misuse the term theory? Because I could swear he was like, oh, it's just a theory, so therefore I could ignore it. That's what I just heard. I don't know about y'all, but that's what I just heard this dude say. A theoretical physicist basically is claiming that gravity is a theory, so therefore, the hell with it. I can ignore it.
Like, let that sink in. The implications of gravity not being real are just like massive, because the whole cosmos that we've been taught is actually constructed on the assumption that every light you see in the sky is like bound to every other object through this force of gravity. So gravity is literally the linchpin that holds the entire cosmos together. And gravity is also needed for the ball Earth to be...
And this is a problem. Why?
Real as well. Like, why would we be on a ball if it wasn't for the force of gravity pulling everything towards the center and creating this like ball in space or whatever? So yeah, and then actually, like, they have this whole history of the universe that they call the Big Bang and evolution and stuff, and that's all based on gravity as well. The whole model, it's like everything. It's they've used gravity as the creator almost.
Okay, I was going to ask, and that's a problem. Why? And then he said that we are using gravity as the creator. Gravity
is what pulled all the matter together, right, and made it into something good. It's like almost like the creator. Yeah. So
his problem with gravity on the universal scale is that it is God, or can be interpreted as God. That is a you problem. If you want to interpret that gravity is a creator because it causes masses to attract each other, then go nuts for those cronuts. But that doesn't make it true. So, what?
Then this calls into question the model of the solar system. So the idea of the sun with the planets going around it, which, as you said from a book, is just like the model of the atom, where you have the...
Okay, I wanted to come back to this. No, it's not. Not even close. even if you take the Bohr model of the atom. So for those of you who may not be aware, Niels Bohr was the first person who really came up with the more modern sort of idea of an atom, where you have a nucleus at the center, and then you have electrons, which are some distance away from it. The Bohr model, if you were to look it up, is the classic sort of envisionment of an atom. You have the nucleus at the center, and then you have electrons, which are orbiting around on circles. And the more electrons, the more circles or more orbits you have. They're even called orbits in the model. However, there are two major problems with this. One, those orbits, well, really just one problem. Those orbits are very specifically constrained. The solar system, the orbits can be inclined to a certain degree, and at this point, we have found planetary inclinations that are very, very high. They are eccentric to one form or another. They can be at any distance from the sun. There are no physical phenomenon or constraints that places the orbits of planets around stars at very specific locations. The Bohr model says otherwise. An electron can only be in a circular orbit, which is coplanar to all of the other electrons at a very particular distance, which corresponds to the amount of energy held by that electron in that orbit. So, not the same. Not even close to being the same. So this assertion that the Bohr model of the atom and the solar system are analogous or basically the same except for scale is a gross misunderstanding of the Bohr model, which again, this is coming from a theoretical physicist who apparently did his dissertation in nuclear physics. So I'm really starting to wonder if he's lying, if this is a grift of some form or another, because this has started to become beyond the pale, how he can make that particular sentence. And then when you get into quantum mechanics, it gets nowhere even close to looking at the solar system. You now have electrons in probability clouds. Some of them are spheres, some of them are bell-shaped, depending on the quantum number, or basically the quantum state of the electron. Doesn't even look remotely similar to any kind of planetary system, let alone our own solar system. So, yeah. Oh, and there's also that in the sense that, akin to, not that one. Akin to this is that the solar system is held together by gravity. The atom is held together by the electrostatic force and the strong nuclear force. So, which have different properties. And yeah. Also, if you redirect a planet in its orbit, you don't get light. A photon doesn't get emitted when Mars moves in its orbit, when it gets deflected towards or away from the sun. It is beyond belief that a theoretical physicist would even have the nuts, have the straight face or straightish face to make such a claim.
The nucleus with the electrons going around it. And, the sun is said to be a nuclear, furnace, basically a nuclear reactor. So you have the nucleus of the atom.
Because it is.
Which is a nuclear force. And then you have the sun, which is also nuclear. And the sun is said to be the biggest source of gravity as well. And also the atomic nucleus is said to be the biggest source of mass, which is where the gravity comes from. So I just see this just this like one-to-one.
So we're going to play the game that because two things sound the same, they are the same, or at least that's what the cabal is trying to imply. Also, the nucleus is the biggest form of mass in the atom. That is true, but that is irrelevant. An atom is not held together by gravity. It is held together by the electrostatics. It has to do with charge, not mass. So, Yeah. Mind-boggling how this cannot be a deliberate deception.
Correspondence between the solar system and the atom, and they're both models. They're models where there's a big ball with lots of other balls spinning around it with no strings attached, right? Nothing attached to them, just all doing that.
So you have a problem with action at a distance. So does electrostatic, basically Coulomb's law. Do you have a problem with Coulomb's law too? How about magnets? Do you have a problem with how magnets work? The Lorentz law, for example. Do we have problems with that? Because that's also action at a distance. So
in space, and we just don't observe that kind of thing happening in normal reality. Now, yes, we look to the sky, we see the stars going round, but actually, we don't need a model of the stars to predict what they're going to do. Like, all you need to do is measure the timings of the planets, right? Like for astrology, for like predicting eclipses and stuff like that. If you want to predict eclipse, 1,000 years in the future, you don't actually need a model of the solar system to do that. You just need accurate measurement of how long each object takes to go around the sky. And, the ancient
he keeps using the word model, but I don't think he knows what that word means. The solar system isn't a model. The Nice model is a model, but the Nice model incorporates basically the start, middle, and end of how the solar system is going to exist. Basically, the dynamics of how the solar system came into being, how it is now, and how it ultimately will evolve and end. Having the solar system isn't some mobile that you put together over a crib where you putting planets right next to. It's not that kind of model. And so this idea that it is just some sort of mathematical abstraction is, because that's the impression that I'm getting, is that he is basically able to dismiss it because it's just something that you can't demonstrate. So therefore, And where's I going with this? Apologies. Train left the station. Can't figure it. Oh yeah, that's right. Now he's going to go down the whole. I don't think he's going to use the S word, but he's going to say that we can predict eclipses. Blah blah blah. That is true to a certain extent. However, there is a certain amount of accuracy that you lose. Well, I guess not. Depending on how you actually measure the risings and settings of things. But the problem with solar eclipses is that with the Saros cycle, or with just measuring how things rise and set in the night sky, you will not be able to accurately predict a location for a solar eclipse. That can only be done by looking at the kinematics or dynamics of the solar system, by actually looking at the orbits of the sun, moon, and the sun, or the earth and the moon, as the orbits of the earth and the moon.
Astronomers knew this. They were observing keenly and, marking like how long each thing takes. And that's how they're able to make astrological predictions way in the future. They didn't need a model to do that. And so, a lot of people think.
Actually, they did. One of the driving motivations behind why Ptolemy did what he did was predictions. We needed to, the idea of why the Ptolemaic model originated in the first place was astrological. There needed to be some way to work out how or where Mars was going to be next month. The Ptolemaic model was based on observations, but you needed the model in order to make predictions in the future. So this idea that astronomers didn't need models to make astrological predictions is just simply wrong. Again, I don't know if he's lying or he's ignorant. This he may be ignorant of. But that was why why the geocentric model was codified, and why why Ptolemaic model came into existence, why the Copernican model came into existence, and then ultimately why Kepler's model came into existence. Copernicus was one of the primary motivators motivations for why Copernicus went into this was because of religious reasons. The church needed to know when Easter was going to be next year. And the Ptolemaic model, or rather the successors to the Ptolemaic model, were becoming increasingly more inaccurate and increasingly cumbersome. So Copernicus said, hey, wait, maybe I can come up with a better scheme, and I can figure out a way to accurately predict where things are, so we can get the calendar sorted so that we know when to hold Mass. Kepler did his thing because Copernicus, in order to get his model to work, put the sun at the center, which, from a physical standpoint, kind of irritated a lot of people. Tycho wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He came up with a Tychonic model. He hired Kepler to make it work mathematically. Kepler couldn't, and ultimately Kepler came up with his 3 laws of planetary motion. Bing, bang, boom. So, wrong.
Heliocentrism is how we're able to predict eclipses, right? That's nonsense, right? It's like they've known
It is not.
that for ages. It's just timing, it's just working out the timing of things.
It is not timing.
So really then all that stuff kind of falls apart. And, to be honest, the flat earth, people, the people who really came out and put themselves out there, your Dave Weiss and Eric Dubay and all these guys, they made masses and masses of content and loads of other great channels where they did an absolutely fantastic job. If the internet was academia, right, it would be settled, right? But the internet is not academia. Academia just carries on its path.
And thank God that the internet is not academia. Again, it goes to this idea that academic study is somehow equitable across all peoples, that it doesn't matter what you've studied. It doesn't matter your profession. It doesn't matter where you have spent the bulk of your training in life. All people should have an equal say as to how science is done. That is, again, not how anything works. You cannot just have lay people making decisions on topics that they truly know nothing about. If you try to do that with medicine, a whole bunch of people are going to die. If you do that with law or with government, you're going to see a tremendous, this is my assumption, you're going to have tremendous inequities in how things are applied. Because people just don't agree with each other on how things should apply in a government or economic sense. So this idea that science is some sort of democracy is wrong-headed to say the least. It will diminish the ability of science to actually do what he wants it to do, which is produce things that are helpful to humanity. From the flat earth side, the only thing that I have ever seen produced from the flat earth side is an app that will leak your personal information to the world. That is the only thing I have seen that was produced by someone from the flat earth and put out to the rest of humanity. Now, you might say that, oh, what about Shane's model? Shane doesn't have a model. Shane has Walter's model. He has just flat out stolen it and just slapped his name on it. So that's the only thing that flat earthers have ever produced, a faulty app that violates your privacy. That's it. That's all it got. Whereas all of the rest of science has produced all of the rest of this.
Regardless
Man, I'm
of
only
what any
halfway through
independent
this.
people are uncovering online. And, that was another thing that became clear, particularly in recent years, with all the injections and everything. It was clear that, academia and the establishment, they just keep on going down this path of scientism no matter what anybody else uncovers online.
Because there is something called the scientific method. Scientific method talks about the idea that science is driven by, wait for it, data. Data acquired through regimented experimentation. Show me any YouTube video that demonstrate, that falls into the scientific method. I challenge anyone out there, point me to a video that shows within the video how the observational setup is actually done, point by point, how the data was collected, what the data actually is, and then how the data is actually interpreted or quantitatively. Yes, using those pesky things that we like to call equations. That is how science is done. What you are describing is simply guesswork, is simply demonstrating something. And oftentimes what you're demonstrating is not what you think you're demonstrating or what they are thinking they're demonstrating. Science has rules. Like them or not, science has rules in order to accurately be able to produce things that are useful to society. And yes, the experiment was not science. The Tony tub, sure as shit, was not science.
And I thought that was quite disturbing because we got that sense on the internet that we're all figuring this out together, and they're just like, no, we're not. We don't listen to you. Like, we're doing our own thing, no matter what anybody on.
No, we are not figuring out this all together. Again, this idea that we all can contribute equally to the understanding of science is just not how it works. You can contribute data. You can, for example, with astronomy, there are a number of projects that I will start highlighting where if you have the appropriate equipment, you can actually take data, send it off so that the experts can evaluate that data and actually move forward with their research. In that way, we can all contribute to science. We can all contribute to science by adding data or sifting through archival data, things of that nature. But when it comes to the actual analysis and interpretation of that data, that must be left to the experts. And even with the collection of data, that takes a certain amount of training as well. So if, for example, the AAVSO, if you go onto that website, aavso.org, they will actually tell you how to appropriately collect the data so that it can be included in these scientific studies. So there does need to be a certain amount of expertise. Not just anyone can say, oh yeah, I know what dark matter is. It's blah. How do you know that? Because I think it's a cool idea.
On the internet discovered. So yeah, so that was a big eye opener, and you see all that came before I started looking into the atomic and nuclear stuff again, and ultimately I realized the atomic and nuclear was actually my, that's my specialty, the flat earth guys and all that, they've covered it. There's nothing I can say about flat earth that hasn't already been said. I'm merely just reflecting back. Yeah.
I agree. There is nothing about flat earth that everything about flat earth has already been said, which is one of its problems. Because science always has something more to say. Flat Earth never does.
The fact that I agree with, the Flat Earth movement and their criticisms of heliocentrism and gravity. And I think it's absolutely a conversation worth having, even though many people don't, right? They think if you even think about Flat Earth, you're not worth talking to, right? That's the prevailing belief. But, it's a group of people who are growing in number constantly, right? Because nobody ever goes back. And I think there's this like sort of unidirectionality to like...
No one ever goes back. This was 4 months ago. So video was posted 4 months ago. Assuming that the interview was contemporary to it, that puts it, we're in May now, January. So unless this interview happened a good month prior to the posting, which I suppose is true, then the final experiment had been done, meaning that Jaron, at the very least, had jumped ship at this point. Now, this very well could, I don't know when Steer jumped off the ship. I don't know when Robinson and the Jake on a plane or whoever the hell it was. I don't know when they decided to leave the flat Earth space. It could very well be that they were after that. But again, unless this was done in, say, early December, even though it was posted in January, the FTE was done, and Jared very quickly after FTE denounced flat Earth. So this idea of unidirectionality is just wrong. I mean, admittedly, he may not have had the data that we have now, but it's simply wrong. Actually, no. We also have the data points of Raichi. Raichi went the other way. We have STST went the other way. We have Randy going the other way. There are examples of people who believed in the flat Earth who now know that it's rightly a globe. So this directionality, unidirectionality, is not accurate. Also, I've heard this idea that flat Earth is on the rise. I've also heard this idea that flat Earth is taking a nosedive. But again, I am driven by data. I have seen data. I have seen no data at all. So anyone making these claims is really just talking out of their ass. Global or no, we don't have the data. We don't know what the numbers look like. So we can't say that flat Earth is growing. We can't say that flat Earth is dying. All we can say is that there are prominent flat earthers who are leaving the flat Earth space, but who knows whether or not those people won't be replaced in a month or two. I know Alan is starting to really grind up his grift and is trying to make a go of it. He's now got merch. So will Alan become the new Jaren? Who knows? I don't even know what it's up to. So this notion that flat Earth is dying or growing or whatever, we don't know because we don't have the data. So I really wish people on both sides of it would really stop saying either one of those two things.
Truth and awakening, right? With things like flat Earth and vaccines and stuff like that. It's like once you don't go back, no one goes back to like getting the injections, right? Or, it is a one-way street, and that it
is not.
That is real. People wake up, they don't.
It is not.
Go back. And I guess that's an important thing to consider when you're looking at all this. It's like,
No, it is not important to consider what is scientifically accurate by looking at what other people think of it. Other people who have no expertise in this field, what they think of it. That is not to be considered. I don't know why you would think that it should be considered. Again, if someone in the biology department came over and said, "Hey, dude, here's a paper on evolutionary biology. What do you think about it?" I would look them dead in the face and say, "Not a biologist. I can't help you." Sure, I could look at it, make some stuff up, and give him my opinion for whatever it's worth. But that would be wholly inappropriate.
It's like no one actually goes, "Oops, I was wrong," and goes back. They don't do it. It's like because you're actually in a better position. You're in a more enlightened, more illumined place with a better
citation needed. How are you in a more illuminated position or enlightened position if you believe the Earth is flat? What are you enlightened to exactly? If you are enlightened to a deception, then that is interesting, because when I ask people who is behind the deception, more often than not, they tell me they don't know, which sounds very unenlightened to me. When I tell you where the science comes from, or when someone asks me where the science comes from, I can give them a very good direction as to where relativity came from. I can point them to the papers of Einstein and say, "Hey, go there and go forward." If I wanted to know if someone wanted to know where our understanding of electromagnetics comes from, I'd be like, "There's this dude named Maxwell. He came up with 4 really groovy equations. Check him out and then go forward." But when it comes to flat Earth, or questions about why, or not, rather, when it comes to asking flat earthers about why it is that the prevailing worldview is a globe, either they don't know or they give me some nonsense such as the Vatican is behind it. So I don't know where he's getting this notion of being illuminated. Unless, of course, he's talking all the way back to, oh, nukes aren't a thing, so therefore I don't have to worry about being destroyed, about humanity being destroyed, and so I am enlightened, and because I don't have that as a burden anymore. I'm sorry, sticking your head in the sand is the exact opposite of being enlightened.
A grasp and a better understanding of things. So why would you go back to a more ignorant position? It just doesn't make sense. So I think just with everything that's happened in recent years, like the whole scientism industry, the connection between all these different departments, the medical and the physics and all that,
What? Riddle me this, Batman. What is the connection between physics and medicine? What does quantum mechanics have to do with vaccines? Are they both denying God? Is that what the connection is? Because I don't see it. You're going to have to spell that out for me a little bit more in depth.
It just became clear that it was all part of one thing, like one mindset or an egregore.
Exactly. And they all
One mindset. Who perpetuated that mindset? Who created it? Who is keeping it going? And why?
seem to have in common what we discussed earlier, which is the lack of utility and necessity of these theories to explain our lived experience, right? So
this is simply denialism. This is simply just repeating that physics, medicine have nothing to offer humanity, despite the very, very obvious, very numerous examples of what these fields of study have to offer humanity.
So, it's not that you're saying things don't fall to the ground. It's that the concept of gravity isn't necessary to explain what density and buoyancy can explain, right? And the
What? I'm better. So, Eric, if you're still here, because you know this dude better than I do. Is this dude an RDD dude? Are you telling me that a theoretical physicist, and I am going to keep beating that horse, a theoretical physicist does not believe in gravity, but believes things go up and down because of relative density disequilibrium? Is that what's going on here?
The logical fallacies that abound in these realms are often exposed by the fact that there were these claims made, right? These claims that it's not actually how we had historically or ancestrally thought it was, right? No, it's actually this way. It's not, an enclosed system that virtually every, traditional society seemed to represent the world as being. No, it's a globe and it's spinning and it's, in this orientation to these other actual mass containing bodies. And that assertion is what requires the evidence. Right.
Which we have. We have an overwhelming amount of evidence that suggests that we are, in fact, the third rock from the sun, that gravity is holding us in place, that there is an entire solar system of planets, comets, and asteroids all surrounding us. There's even evidence, a large amount of evidence, if you want to be subjective, that the universe is really big, that it is really old, that it is expanding, and that it may have had a beginning at some point. So there is evidence to suggest that we are a flat, closed system. That is extraordinary.
rather than the defense of what already was the conclusion based on our observed experience, right? So when these new scientific theories are posited, the burden of proof is on, the proclamation, right? Is on the.
It is not. If you want to talk about a new theory, flat Earth is a new theory. Flat Earth didn't really take off until, didn't really get sort of attention until 2015, 2017. And I just unfortunately decided to read parts of Gleason's book, Is the Earth Round? That was written in 1890, something, or 1893 was the second edition. So again, not that old. I mean, it's definitely newer than gravity is. So again, they're perpetuating this myth that flat Earth was the default at some beginning where we were scientifically educated, and that somewhere along the lines we decided to reject that reality and institute our own that rejected God. That's not how it worked. Now, did other societies believe the Earth was flat at one point in their existence? Sure. Egyptians certainly did. I don't know when they stopped. The Greeks stopped around, 300 BC or so, or basically the time of Aristotle. Aristotle clearly stated he did not believe the Earth was flat. So where was this golden age where we were all where humanity was all in agreement that the Earth was flat? And what was the evidence that supported that? And again, when did that if you think about this to any extent, this whole fantasy of how flat Earth evolved falls apart. It's not historical in any way whatsoever. It's just simply a lie to tell yourself in order to make you feel better about the veracity of flat Earth claims.
These concepts, and that's what you break down in the book. And of course, these other, thought leaders that you're referencing have deconstructed ad nauseum. Right? It's like, no, the actual proof doesn't exist for your positive assertion. And
did she just say that Dearth was a thought leader? Agree to disagree. Whitsitt is a thought leader? Right.
There actually isn't a need to prove otherwise, the default, right? So when you claim something is different, you're the one who has to prove that it is in fact different, right?
I have to
So
thank
I wanna
you guys
read
for that. Sorry, just let me thank you and the other sort of like people who opened my mind to germ theory and viruses and all that, because I got that from you guys that the person making the positive claim, the burden of proof is on them, and it's you're perfect.
I've heard this argument ad nauseum. The positive claim is the claim that is in opposition to what is accepted by the scientific community. So you can't just say that something that has been established for decades or hundreds, or in some decades, or in some cases hundreds of years, is the positive claim. That is the default. That is the baseline in which you are. That is the foundation, or that is the framework that you are contesting by saying that germs ain't a thing, that nukes ain't a thing. So no, the burden of evidence is on you to establish whether or not to demonstrate that these things, that our understanding of these things is wrong.
Perfectly within your rights to say there's no viruses, there's no electrons, there's no gravity.
Are you perfectly in your rights to say that there are no viruses, there's no gravity, whatever? Yes, you are perfectly well within your rights to say these things. You would be wrong, but you would be well within your rights to say them.
Because there literally is no viruses, no electrons, or gravity anywhere for anyone to see, right? So it's the person who says that it is there. They need to have the proof, right? We don't need to disprove it. They need to prove it. And And as we've seen, they haven't. So they haven't proved
Right,
this. So,
exactly. Right. Just like if you say, we evolved and changed form from monkeys, right? That's up.
We don't say that we evolved from monkeys. No one has ever said that we evolved from monkeys who actually understands evolution in any form at all. Fuck.
Up to you to prove that, right?
Yeah.
Because that, there are all sorts of assertions you can make. And in fact, what we find when we actually do the digging is the proof isn't there. But the replace.
When you do the digging, by that, do you mean watching YouTube videos? I know that's a bit, hypocritical, living in a glass house, throwing stones, but is your proof YouTube videos or books written by people on YouTube?
Fallacy that suggests, okay, well, if it's not this, then you tell me what it is one of these traps, that even in discussion we can get baited into, right? If it's not a virus, an invisible particle causing human illness, then what is it? Well, in fact, that replacement theory is not necessary to.
That replacement theory is necessary. And I just had a conversation with somebody named Risky that basically quoted that at me again, or that same thing, is that in science, again, we're talking about science. You keep saying scientism, you keep claiming that scientism is some sort of cult or religion or what have you. In science, we are looking for descriptions of physical reality. Medicine is based on germ theory. So if you take germ theory away, we no longer understand medicine. And so if we do no longer understand medicine, we can no longer progress in medicine. So if you want us to progress in medicine, if you want our medicines to become better and better, our pharmaceuticals to become better and better, our ways of treatment to become better and better, then you need to come up with a replacement. This is simply laziness. Saying that we don't need to give you a replacement is simply a cop-out. It is telling me you are not willing to put in the work to gain the expertise to actually solve these problems. All you want to do is burn the house down for whatever reason. When you tell me you do not have to replace it, then you are telling me that you really aren't interested in the truth. Now, you can rephrase it, because I don't expect a non-expert to be able to replace it, obviously. But you can, but instead of saying we don't need a replacement, you can say we don't know yet, but these are the people who are actively working on theories to replace it. But you can't say that because there's no one on the side of the aisle who's actually doing it. Any sort of flat Earth experiments aren't trying to explain how the Earth came, or how the flat Earth works. It's only trying to disprove that the Earth is a globe. That's it. That's not how science works. So this argument that you are not required to put forth a better explanation when the things that you are refuting have functional uses, are used on a daily basis for very practical reasons, is just lazy and a cop-out and disingenuous.
To have a scientifically rigorous exploration, right? And that's where this burden of proof on the novel claim comes in. So I want to read this list because I think it's a really satisfying list. It's about a page and a half long, which is the key implications of the globe hoax, right? So there are many places to go down.
It's a hoax. Hoaxes are perpetuated. So now we know that Dr. Young does not believe that we are simply wrong. We now have more evidence to suggest that he believes that there has been an active deception laid upon the people of Earth.
Down the rabbit hole if you're curious about this, but this is like a really great summary. So you write, Every picture video model of the globe Earth is a fabrication. Globes are not for educational purposes, as they say, right? If you flip one over in a kindergarten classroom, that's what it says. The ocean horizon line is always observed to be flat, level. Ships that disappear over the horizon are seen again with zoom lenses,
They are not.
which is often one of the assertions, right? Like, oh, they're going over the curve. No, not really. The stated curvature of 8 inches per mile squared is not, in fact, observed, right? Which means that we can actually see things we shouldn't be able to see. The Earth
Wrong. We can see too far because of refraction.
is not a planet or an object. It's the ground. It's your flesh. The North Pole is the center.
What now? Let me see if I can back this up just a teeny bit.
Planet or an object. It's the ground. It's your flesh.
The Earth is not an object, is not a planet. It's just the ground. It is your flesh. What? I think Roger would like to have a word for mud fossil, because if you think the Earth is flesh, then I think you have a job waiting for you at Mud Fossil University.
The North Pole is the center of the realm, not the sun. Gleason's map provides the best view of the territory.
This book must have been written prior to FTE, and regardless, there were many observations of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica, which is basically impossible on the Gleason's map. So Dr. Young is stating that the Gleason's map is, in fact, an accurate model or an accurate map for the flat Earth.
The Great Ocean is flat like a giant circular puddle. Antarctica is an ice shelf surrounding the edge of the puddle. The land is stationary and immovable within the water. North is in.
So immovable within the water. So plate tectonics ain't a thing either.
And south is out. East is anti-clockwise and west is clockwise. Sun and moon move in spiral paths above the Earth plane. Gravity is fictitious.
They move in. Oh, all right, because they go back and forth. Is that a spiral? I guess that may be considered a spiral.
Nobody landed on the moon. It's not a land. There are no orbiting satellites, just balloons, drones, and aircraft. NASA
Set of balloons.
weightless videos are filmed in Vomit Comet aircraft. Astronauts are bad.
So weightlessness is filmed in Vomit Comets. So it's not just CGI. It's not people in harnesses. It's Vomit Comets. Do you know how a Vomit Comet? Well, of course you don't know how a Vomit Comet works. The amount of weightlessness is a couple of minutes, at most. There is no way that you could get certain footage of the ISS weightless if it was in a Vomit Comet. The other thing is, when you look at people in a Vomit Comet, you can see, well, I guess they would cut it off, but the weightlessness is not uniform throughout that entire event because of the trajectory of the plane. So,
Bad actors, liars, and counterintelligence agents. Rockets are fireworks. There is no Tesla in space and no telescopes either. There is no outer
no telescopes in space. Got it.
space. It's all inner space. Pressurized air implies we're in a hermetically sealed container. That's a huge one, right? Like you can't have, propulsion and these things that ostensibly are available in so-called outer space with.
Where is the proof or any evidence that a dome exists? Let alone such questions as what is the dome made of? What is the thickness of the dome? Is there anything beyond the dome? Because if you have a dome, then to me, that would indicate there is something beyond the dome or or is this just wrong way of thinking about it? Is this basically a scenario where you look at the expansion of the universe and you think there must be something outside of the universe, but in fact, you're simply not being able to conceptualize essentially a expanding three-dimensional space? So is it akin to that? Is the reason why the reason why asking the question, what is beyond the dome, nonsensical because of some physical mechanism or interpretation? So evidence, just some evidence would be nice.
Without a closed container. Stars are not nuclear, and they're not millions of light years away. Planets are not lands. They can't be.
Evidence suggests that stars are in fact nuclear fusion reactors, and they are millions and millions of miles or kilometers away, or light years away. What evidence is there to suggest they are not?
Be landed on or conquered. Nobody is going to Mars on a rocket. Mars is not a land. President Nick.
I also liked that in his mind, his conceptualization of the moon is that the moon is not a land where you can go colonize and conquer. Your white dude is showing. I'm sorry. You might want to do something about that. When I think of the moon, I don't think of the moon as, hey, there's some land up there that we need to conquer. Yeah, let's conquer the solar system.
Nixon didn't phone the moon from a rotary dial in 1969.
Yes, he did.
And the Space Force is a space farce. So that is quite a list.
That is quite a list of bullshit.
The implications.
Yeah, a non-exhaustive list, I must say.
Right.
Oh, so he has more bullshit. Good to know.
Exactly.
There's so much more, isn't there?
And
So much more bullshit. Good to know.
well, yeah, to just touch on the last two, I'd love to hear what you feel are the implications of debunking, if we want to use that term, evolutionary theory and germ theory. Like, what are the implications? Who cares whether
I'm going to speed this up. Oops.
our history as a species is as we've been told, and we crawled out of the water and then turned into a monkey, and then some magical day turned into a human. Is it that the Christians were right this
That's not what happened.
whole time? What are the implications of letting go of this theory that doesn't seem to have the evidence to back it up that it would require as a positive assertion? And and what do you take away from germ theory not being true?
Well, I got a great deal of power from learning all about germ theory, which I really knew nothing about until 2020, and I was really upset looking into this now. But to go start with evolution, because germ theory comes out from that. But with evolution, it's it's obviously quite an incredible thing to believe anyway. Just all the transmutation of species. And
Why is it an incredible thing to believe in? It's not an incredible thing for me to believe in. Again, it sounds like a you problem.
everything, and all these long time frames and the trial and error, and your cousins being monkeys and all that kind of stuff.
Evolution does not say that your cousins were monkeys.
But really, where I find most opposition with it is actually opposed to creation, and there was a big debate back in I think the 90s of evolution versus creationism, and I wasn't paying too much attention to it at that time. But
No, there was a big debate as to whether or not creationism should be taught in schools. But creationism has unfortunately been around for a while, not since the 90s.
I remember it was coming up. I think it was a big debate in the States and maybe on the media and stuff like that. Like, should schools teach kids that we evolved, or should they teach them that we were created? Anyway, back at that time, I had my head in physics. I wasn't really thinking about this stuff. But as I came, as to be an artist, like professional artist, I was appreciating art and
He's a professional artist? All right.
appreciating nature. Looking in detail at nature's designs and patterns and so on is like part of how I get my inspiration. And I just started to see how evolution is totally opposed to the idea of creation itself. The idea of even creativity. Because it's like, well, where did creativity?
So evolution is not just anti-creation, it's anti-creativity. The idea that the universe or that life went from single-cell organisms to some of the most by default, the most complex forms of life that ever existed, to very complex multicellular organisms, that is somehow not creative, and that somehow negates creation. So, coming from a Christian standpoint, evolution does not negate the idea that a God exists, because God could have made it that way. God could very easily have said, hey, I'm going to make up these things called laws of physics. I'm going to make up this other thing called laws of biology. And I am just going to allow them to dictate how my creation evolves in time. That's definitely possible with an infinite God. So again, I don't see the logical conclusion behind evolution being a thing and God not being a thing. Those two things do not equate to each other. One does not affirm the other one or disaffirm or deny the other one. Evolution doesn't say there is no God. I really wish people would, I really wish someone would explain it to me as if I was a 5-year-old. Why is it that God cannot have created evolution? That specifically, I don't want to hear, well, it violates the Bible, and if you violate the Bible, you're rejecting God. I don't want to hear that, because that is not a valid explanation to me. I want to know why it is that evolution itself cannot or denies the existence of God.
To come from, if we all just evolved, you're sort of, because you're saying that the universe didn't create us, but somehow we're capable of creating things, like the universe created creative beings, or the universe evolved creative beings. It's just a very strange thing to believe in. When I look at nature, I see it's like the highest art, it's like, so, the designs are so perfect. The human body, for example.
This is another thing that I wanted to get into at some point, was this idea of perfection. Is that intelligent designers will state that the creation of the universe as we see it is perfect. And then you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson who will say, well, what about birth defects? And the thing that literally made me stop watching his presentation when he claimed that because a molecular cloud only converts 3% of its mass into stars, how is that perfection? To me, to be able to make any sort of claim as to whether or not the universe is perfect or imperfect in its design is extremely arrogant. Because in order to understand that the universe's design is perfect or not, one has to understand the universe's design and everything that it interacts with. That is beyond the capability of any fallible human being. Therefore, we cannot make any sort of claim as to whether or not creation is perfect or not, based on observations. You can say the universe is perfect because God created it that way. That would be a belief. That would be a hallmark of faith and not science. So there's that. But you can't say you objectively observe the universe and observe it to be perfect. Because what is the definition of perfect? The sun's or the year is not perfect. To me, a perfect year would be a year which is an integer number of days, is a year which we can make a calendar, a single calendar, and never have to alter it ever again. That to me would be perfect. That is not what we have. So this assertion that he observes the universe and it's perfect, okay, your reality and mine are, or at least your definition of perfect and mine, ain't the same thing. Also, I'm curious how he feels about homosexuals, because, two guys getting some ass play, getting a piece of ass, that's out there. That's perfect. Is that perfect to you? I got nothing to say about it. They do they. But, and not to even mention the, the idea of catastrophic natural events, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, all of that. That to you is perfect?
And plants and animals and everything are just so perfect in their artistic design that I came into a very much a creationist point of view. And it wasn't just like, I did read the Bible. I did start reading the Bible about like 5-6 years ago. But it wasn't just that. It was just like I just felt like I am a created being. Like I've been created by a creator, and so as everything else natural in this world is perfect. Everything created by man is imperfect or temporary. But all the nature, all the things created by God, as it were, are perfect and everlasting. And so I just.
So he hasn't really read the Bible. He probably doesn't identify as Christian, is what I'm hearing. Yet he still uses the word God. He still uses the idea of a creator. So his theology is incomplete or immature, in my opinion.
Really began to see this dichotomy, and then evolution. I have a chapter on it, although it's one of the smaller chapters. There's a lot that can be said about it, but I didn't go into it in too much depth. It's really just a philosophical point I have with it, where it's opposed to creation and creativity, which as an artist, it's kind of offensive. And
so it is your opinion that creation or that evolution is against creativity. Your opinion. Science does not operate by opinion. It operates by data.
In that sense, like imagine somebody in the future, like 100 years in the future, 1,000 years, a million years in the future, finds my music and they're listening to it, and then they're like, where did this come from? How did this come about? And if they were to say, well, it evolved, it's just the idea, that a piece of music evolved is just ludicrous, right?
So now you're saying that music theory has not evolved. Right. I'm pretty sure people in our music department over here would like a word. So he doesn't even understand music. We can add that to the list of what does he not understand? Science. How reality works. Music.
It's just the idea that the human being evolved, or any other of these like perfect works of creation, that they just came about through some like fumbling of atoms. It all comes back to atoms in the end, because once you get rid of the creator, there's nothing left but atoms, right? So the atoms.
No. What is stopping a creator from creating atoms? There is nothing about that is preventative. In fact, there aren't a lot of creationists who believe in atoms. So are you telling me that those particular people are also wrong? For why? What reason do you have? What legitimate physical reason do you have to make the statement that because atoms exist, that God can't?
Are the substance of creation, but they're also the creator. Like it's made not just from atoms, but by atoms. That's in the scientific view, everything's made by atoms. It's like the atoms just did it all by themselves. They were just flapping around, on the space rocks and joining together to make molecules.
They did it by themselves based on the laws of physics and biology, and chemistry, which you can attribute to God. There is nothing preventing you from attributing it to God. Doing so does not make it scientific, just to be clear, but you can do it.
And so on, and just like build it up like that. But it's all entirely theoretical, based on sketchy like mathematical theories and stuff like that. Just not something we see in reality.
Sketchy mathematical theories. Pretty sure Clive Wells would like a word with you. Yeah, not so sketchy.
What we see is that we're creative beings. Like we're human beings. They're like the ultimate creative workers. We can build anything, we can do anything, we can conceive of anything, and it's that we're made in the divine image.
We can do anything, we can conceive of anything. I thought we were imperfect. If we are imperfect beings, then we can't create everything. We can't do everything. Because we're not perfect, by your own admission. Your own logic within 10 minutes, within 5 minutes, is not self-consistent. And you, sir, are a theoretical physicist, or at least gain the credentials to claim to be a theoretical physicist. And yet your logic is not self-consistent within the span of 5 minutes. Do better.
So I believe that we're able to create because the divine is able to create, and we're made in the divine image. We have that edge over animals, that kind of creative edge. From there then, well, with germ theory, so...
Guess who created animals, dipshit? God. So Are you saying because we were created in his image, we are now able to create perfect things and animals aren't? Because yeah, I'm also curious as to what you think being created in God's image is, what that means.
So I know a lot of in science, like people like to stick to their lane, right? Like if you're a medical guy, you only talk about medicine, you don't talk about physics. So as a physicist, I'm like, well, how can I say anything about medicine and biology? I'm not a biologist, but it was such a...
The reason why you can't say anything about biologists because you're not a biologist is because you don't know biology. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. In order to say anything intelligent about a particular field of study, particularly when you're talking about the advancement of that particular field of study, you need expertise. Again, if one of my biology colleagues comes in and gives me a new paper that talks about some minutia within evolutionary biology and says, hey, tell me what you think, I'm going to look at him and say exactly what you did. Not a biologist. It is not appropriate for me to comment on active research within a field of study that I know nothing about or know very little about. Yes, you need to stick to your lane, dude. I stick to astronomy. There is a definitive reason why I have never made and will never make a video talking about why evolutionary biology is correct. It's because I don't know anything really about it in order to speak intelligently on that subject. Stay in your lane.
It's such a big thing that affected us all. And it actually, I realized when I started looking into virus theory, I realized that, well, virus is a quantum thing. Like, it's actually in my domain. So even though it sounds like the virus is the domain of medicine and doctors and so on, actually, when you look at really what they're described as being, it's supposed to be a collection of 5 million atoms together in this like cluster, like this kind of like super molecule thing. So that actually puts it well within my grasp as an atomic scientist. And so, yeah, I found just the more I saw about viruses and looked into the theory, it just seemed like it was just always just getting further and further away. You're never actually getting to the thing, right? Because there is no thing. It's an idea that's, just made up and it's like actually based on all those other things, based on evolution.
So viral theory is made up because there's no such thing as a virus. It's not that we have images of those or anything, but go nuts with those cronuts.
And based on atomism, then I started to develop this kind of zoomed out perspective at that point. And this was really just in the last few years, starting to write the book and talking with yourself and the other people we've spoken to in our group. It's like a sort of multidisciplinary group of people who've been questioning their fields and also, questioning the general scientific consensus. And yeah, so I saw like viruses almost being like the cherry on top of this whole structure of science that goes back, a few hundred years. And then where did it all lead in the end, right? What's the fruit of all of that? It was the needle, right? The injection. That was the thing. That's the physical, all of this thought. Where's it all leading? It's all leading towards all of you have to take this needle in your arm.
So again, people in the comment section, people here watching live, did he just say the culmination of all scientism was the needle? That the culmination of all of heliocentrism, of atomism, of evolution, all of that, the culmination of all of that was the vaccine, the needle. Because if that's the case, this dude is out there. This dude is, I don't know what this dude is, because that is a big claim. And what the first question is, really? That's it? That's all of that misinformation, all of the lies that need to be told in order to keep the secret of the flat earth, or keep the secret of the flat earth, keep the secret of the dome, keep the secret of that nukes aren't nukes, but big fucking bombs. All of this culminates. The reason for it is the vaccine. That's a serious long game for a seriously stupid result. Okay.
Oh, you're not going to get your life back, right? And for me, that's not a fruit. that's not the fruits of science, right? That's actually like an evil plan, and it's just, yeah. So it really just brought it all together for me, all of it.
So next question is, which he's not going to elaborate on, unfortunately, is why was that the plan? And why is it evil? So... yeah, and considering you only figured out about germ theory last, and only within the last couple of years, so I just, so many questions.
And was really the inspiration for the book in the end, was like sort of making this framework and then debunking it all and showing people that there is in fact ancient science that explains everything. So none of that stuff was even needed to begin with. It's all just misguided human activity, ultimately all that science.
So all of science that we can use right now was actually developed by the ancients, and we don't need anything we've discovered within the last 200 years. If that's the case, then why weren't the Mayans driving around in Cadillacs?
Science is just misguided human activity. It doesn't produce anything, doesn't help anyone, costs lots of money, and of course people's careers are like wrapped up in it, right? Like, we can sit here and like talk about it and everything, but people who actually have a paid job to talk about that thing, they're going to defend it because their whole career and life is on the line. And
Also tired of this excuse of, oh, we only do this because we're paid to do this. We only believe this because we're paid to believe this. No, we believe this because all of the facts that we have observed and all of the experiments that we have done personally validate what we've been taught.
They can pay, they have a cushy job to just come and all they have to do is like talk about physics and defend it or whatever. They don't have to produce anything, they don't have to make anything, they just have to hold it down by just talking about it over and over again. I see as a lot.
That is not how anything works. In fact, one of the problems with academia is this thing called perish and publish, or publish or perish, in that you do have to produce something. You have to produce papers. You have to produce active research. Now, you could make the claim, which he most certainly would, that these papers aren't actually producing anything, that these are, in fact, these are not products of production, that these are just somehow just talking about physics. But this is where the technology comes from, is you put out a paper and then someone figures out how to monetize that thing into a piece of technology. So that is not how anything works.
All these like celebrity physicists and stuff, that's all they do, is they just talk about what's in the textbooks, ad nauseum, and never
No.
question, never question any of it. Like, so I had to just give it all I got in the book.
So if we never questioned anything, then how did our understanding of gravity change? If we never produced anything new, then how is it that we went from a classical understanding of gravity to a relativistic understanding of gravity? If all we're doing is just repeating what's in the textbooks, how are any scientific revolutions done? How is it that Copernicus was simply just talking about what was in the textbooks when he developed his heliocentric model? How is it that Kepler was simply repeating what he learned in textbooks when he derived, or rather formed, the empirical laws of planetary motion? How is that simply regurgitating information they learned from textbooks? I honestly want to know.
Really, didn't pull any punches. I was just after the last 4 years, the gloves are off, right? It's like, if I'd written this book earlier, I would be super polite and just tiptoeing. But I thought after what?
And yeah, I'd love to see some gold, buddy. I'd love to see you spin iron or lead into gold. That would be pretty awesome.
The science world.
Oh, and not for nothing, Newton was an alchemist. One of the explanations for why Newton kind of went woo later in his life was because he liked to play with mercury a lot. And so that sort of led to a bit of cognitive decline. So he was an alchemist. It is very funny to me how, of the two fields of study, which some have argued he basically spent half of his life on physics and half of his life on alchemy, there is an argument to be made that he spent more of his time on alchemy because he really didn't do much after he published Optics and the Principia. But he kept doing alchemy until the end of his days. It's interesting to me that we have Optics, we have the Principia, but we have none of his alchemical writings. We do not know of any alchemical phenomenon that he was able to characterize. We have classical mechanics on one hand, and we have nothing on the other. So, which field of study is more fruitful? Physics or alchemy?
World has done to me in the last years, it's been an absolute assault of like nonsense, bad theory, pseudoscience, like, you know, evil, all sorts of things, all messed up in this scientism worldview. And so I can't hold back now. Like, I really got to just
Scientism is evil. Citation needed.
let loose and debunk it as hard as I can.
So people love to ask me questions, and I
very different locus of power and life force. So I wonder what you would say is, what is the best feeling part of everything that you've awakened to, would you say, in summary, I guess?
That's a good question. I mean, when people write to me and say they've read my book and it's really transformed their worldview, it feels amazing. I've had a lot of emails like that recently, including my own cousin, who said he had a total, complete worldview transformation by reading the book.
Don't care.
In academia, you're taught to be like super objective, right? And just write about the science. Never use the word I. Don't talk about yourself, right? And I think that's a problem, right? Because you don't know anything about the person who did the work, right? And
that isn't a problem, and actually, the use of personal pronouns is not a universal thing. Some astronomers use personal pronouns, others don't. I don't, because it isn't about me. It's about the work. So it is a deliberate choice when I wrote papers, and hopefully when I write papers in the future. When I write these papers, I make the deliberate choice not to use personal pronouns because the work is not about me. The work is about the work. It's about the data that was collected. It was how the data was analyzed, and it was how the data can be interpreted. That's it. It isn't about the author. Because that leads to, again, this idea of a cult of personality, that somehow the person is somehow tied, the quality of the person is somehow tied to the quality of work. Because the atomists were hedonists and like to have a lot of sex, their work can be freely dismissed because amoral. That's not how anything works.
It's like, as we find out, a lot of these like quantum physicists were like pedophiles and stuff, like Schrodinger and that, but they don't tell you.
Schrodinger was Schrodinger liked him young. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. That's a claim. Really would love to see the evidence. Actually, no, I don't want to see the evidence of that because, yeah, it's a despicable thing to claim. But the reason why I don't want to see evidence of it is because it has nothing to do with Schrodinger's work. Again, this is, if I were to use the things I hate, this is a poisoning the well fallacy. You are disparaging the scientist so that the person will then disparage their work. A person and their work are two very different things. Granted, when it comes to the arts, you get a lot of problem. It becomes very problematic because I really, really don't like J.K. Rowling, but I think Snape is one of the most romantic characters in modern literature. Really loves me some Snape. My career goal is ultimately to become the head of the Slytherin house at Hogwarts, but I hate J.K. Rowling. I really don't like what Tom Cruise has said about psychology and Scientology, but I do loves me some Mission Impossible. So again, the person who came up with something and their proclivities is independent of what they have produced. Snape was a horrible person and you misunderstood. Wrong. Snape he sacrificed himself for Draco. He sacrificed his own happiness to look after the child of the woman he loved, even though the woman he loved rejected him in favor of a guy who bullied him in high school. That to me is romance. Snape was the most, again, Snape is the most romantic, or is one of the more romantic characters in modern literature. Whatever. Yeah, I will fight you. That is a hill. That is a hill that I will die on. Was he an obsessed stalker? I don't see it that way. He was in high school. Let's be fair. So, as high schoolers, we're always a bit, dumb, and we do dumb shit. He was in love, but it was beyond the high school years that he. It was beyond the high school years that he showed his romance. And the thing was, okay, and I will get off this before, he joined the Death Eaters he joined the Death Eaters in order to get Lily. However, he did not kill James Potter, and he left the Death Eaters and later became a spy for them, a spy in them. So again, he is not a horrible person. He may have done horrible things, but he is a truly romantic character.
Anyway, and they're not writing about their life in their scientific papers. So I thought, no, I have to write about my life and the transformation that I've gone through as someone who was in that world, coming to where
I don't care. This goes into another thing that evangelicals love to do that really, I don't care. They will tell me, if you don't repent, you will go to hell. I used to be a tranny who used to smoke or who used to snort coke off a prostitute's dick. I used to be really evil. And then I found Jesus. I don't give a shit. That is not pertinent to the concept of salvation. And that is not pertinent to the concept of whether or not you should involve yourself in anyone's journey of salvation. What you did in a past life is completely irrelevant. Has no basis for this. His journey to where he got with his ideals, in terms of the scientific veracity of his ideals, is irrelevant. Now, from a psychological standpoint, if someone wanted to understand how he got to where he is now, his past is relevant. But when it comes to whether or not the earth is flat with a dome on it, the fact that you couldn't get a job for 6 months after your dissertation or after you got your PhD does not factor into it at all.
Where I'm now, and that's really the transformative power. If I just read a book of facts with nothing about me, but just all objective facts, it would be boring. And I think that's what
it would be boring to you. Again, this seems like a you problem. You give me a paper on exoplanets, which is just a recitation of facts, effectively. I don't find that boring. That excites me. Not in the sexual kind of way, but that is what one of the things that I really love about astronomy is learning new things about certain aspects of astronomy. I love reading about the discoveries of the early universe by JWST. I love reading about new exoplanet discoveries, particularly in terms of protoplanetary disks. These are not boring to me. And the fact that they're boring to you, I think, says something. So I'm now hearing is, because you think that modern science is boring, you have to come up with something that's more titillating. So, atoms, boring. Some kind of connected ether, exciting, yay. What does that have to do with reality? What does my or your opinion on things, and my opinion on things, what does that have to do with actual objective reality?
Why a lot of these books, like propaganda books, that's how they're written. Textbooks. There's nothing about the author in the book at all, right? It's just all about the subject. And so, yeah.
That's how textbooks are supposed to be written. They're not about the author. They're about the text. How do you not understand this? Like, if a book is well written, then you can kind of gain a sense of the author from the text. Like, I have a E&M book over there. I think it's Griffin. And the way he writes things, there's a very dry sense of, you can tell there's a very dry sense of humor through the text. Nothing overt, but it's definitely a much funner read than Jackson is, which is, to me, just a boring recitation of facts. Because I'm really, particularly when it comes to E, I'm really not interested in E. M is cool. E, not so much. But where in the scientific method says the scientist has to be cool, man, has to be fun and interesting? Where in the scientific method does that fall into it?
Yeah, like talking with you and other members in the group, and that, really just made me realize that I threw myself into the book as well to really give it that transformational power and help people to see that I've actually gone through a transformation.
So what you're saying is that your ideas are insufficient to transform someone else. Your ideas are insufficient to convince people of your way of thinking. The only way that you can transform someone into your way of thinking is by interjecting yourself into the narrative. So it's not your ideas that are transformative, but you that is what's transformative. One, that what that tells me is A, your ideas suck, and two, that you have a savior complex. Again, your white dude is showing. You might want to see to that. This idea that you have to interject yourself in order to make your ideas more compelling is extremely prideful. And again, illustrates to me that your ideas do not have the strength to stand up on their own to scrutiny and are not compelling in and upon themselves to change someone's mind who isn't already inclined to listen to you.
I wasn't born a flat earther. As people talk to you like that, don't you? When you question, they talk to you as if you were just like born a flat earther and you're like some like aberration, or abomination of nature or something. It's like, no, I just believe everything you believe. Like, I believed even deeper than you because I went like to get a PhD and master's.
I believed even deeper than you, man. I loved me some science. I loved me some astronomy. That's beyond gotten old.
Science and all this.
It's stale and is moldy at this point.
I went so deep into it.
Again, I don't give a shit about your childhood. I don't give a shit about how many times you watched Star Wars as a child. I don't give a shit about how deep you went into the study. Insofar as I wonder how the fuck you got here when you did a dissertation on nuclear related to nuclear physics and you now believe that atoms are not a thing. That's as far as I go with giving a shit about your life story.
And then, I've come out of it now, and yeah, it's a great feeling. I mean, I don't know what the best feeling part of it is. I suppose it is just when somebody appreciates it, when somebody actually reaches out to you and tells you how much they appreciate what you've done. I think for me is the best feeling.
So being appreciated feels good. In other news, water is wet and also made out of atoms, molecules, that sort of thing.
Feeling part of it. Yeah.
So the entire second half of your book is on this subject. We're clearly not going to do it justice with this final question, but I want to just, introduce folks to the progression from the resolution of these deceptions for you, which is alchemy, right? So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how alchemy brings your worldview into focus.
Yeah, well, so I've been researching alchemy actually for years before I even looked into the flat earth stuff, and actually made it easier to grasp and less of a shock.
So the second half of his book is on alchemy. Yeah, I think I am basically going to end it there. I don't need to hear about his ideas on alchemy because one, not a chemist, and B, I'm just kind of tired of this dude. I've been going at it for 3 hours now, and So yeah, I'm basically going to end that here, folks. So final thoughts on Dr. Steve Young. This is a man who got his PhD in he got his PhD doing theoretical work on nuclear physics or atomic physics. He has now since rejected the idea that atoms are a thing. He has rejected the idea that gravity is a thing. He believes the Earth is flat and covered by a dome. He does not believe germs are a thing. He is full on into misinformation or scientific denialism. You know, unlike Dr. Faulkner or Jason Lisle or any of the people at Answers in Genesis, who are strictly divinely directed, or they use God as the foundation for all of their thinking or their worldview. They believe in that the Earth is a globe. They believe that, you know, science or astronomy is basically right, except for this little thing about how old it is and where the universe came from. This is a dude who has the credentials of being a physicist, who has rejected all of that. He does not believe pretty much in any mainstream scientific idea across the board. Doesn't even believe in plate tectonics. So it bothers me a lot that he is being interviewed on a channel that has 31.6K subscribers. From what I'm getting from the chat from Eric and someone else, both Dr. Kelly Brogan, who is now she is no longer board certified in psychiatry and refers to herself as a holistic psychiatrist, but she still holds an MD. Dr. Kelly Brogan and Dr. Stephen Young are both best-selling authors putting out misinformation. This dude has a best-selling book that says the Earth is flat and that alchemy is a thing. I don't know where, I don't know what kind of world I'm living in anymore. I didn't think flat Earth was all that dangerous, but apparently it is a gateway drug into, at least for Dr. Stephen Young, as he admitted, it is a gateway drug into other science denialism. And he literally says the cherry on top is denial of germ theory, that the entirety of the misinformation campaign surrounding evolution, surrounding the shape of the Earth, the cosmology, all of that culminated to quote unquote the needle. Of course, he doesn't say anything about who they are or why they thought that the culmination of this entire psyop was the needle. He doesn't say anything about that, but that is what he believes. So I don't know what to make of this. I still don't know what to make of this. I mean, we had Dr. Stephen Alonso. Apparently, he's not actually a doctor. Okay. But now I'm becoming more and more aware of credentialed individuals who believe in things that are just preposterous in my mind, that are antithetical to science. Their ideas on how science is and what science does is completely wrong in terms of what science actually does and what science can actually say about things. They make logical connections that are illogical, that the connective tissue between evolution and God, there is no connective tissue stating that evolution denies the existence of God. There is no logical follow-through in that. So I don't know what to make of this. I don't know to be even more upset or more, not upset, but alarmed that I am learning about more and more credentialed individuals who believe this and putting this out there. And now I'm starting to, like, Dr. Alonso, probably not a doctor. Dr. Heffron, who is puts out the celestial theodolite experiment. Apparently his doctorate is in computer science. You have Dr. Robitaille out there who believes the sun is made out of condensed matter, but his doctorate is in neuroscience. This dude is a theoretical physicist, and he doesn't believe that atoms are a thing. So I don't know what to make of this. I mean, it's easy to label him a grifter. It's easy to label him a grifter. It's easy to label Brogan as a grifter. But I think it's easy. And I don't like things that are easy, because of all the things they can grift on, of all the things they can try to make money on, perpetuating the idea, well, one, perpetuating ideas that are demonstrably false, such as a closed Earth system being flat, that atoms are not a thing, perpetuating information that is demonstrably false. That's one thing. But they don't do just that. They claim that it is a psyop. They claim that there is something perpetuating a global deception surrounding these facts. And they often claim that this cabal or whatever this movement is in fact evil and in some way, shape, or form dehumanizing, and is meant as a form of control, be it satanic or not. But effectively, science is a dehumanizing force of control. So of all the things they could grift on, they have decided that they want to do this, that they want to perpetuate not only bad science, but also they want to perpetuate fear. Now, maybe I just don't understand the science of the grift. Maybe that's part and parcel of grifting, is that you have to make your people or make your targets afraid so that they will buy into what you're saying. Maybe that's what's going on here. But again, and yeah, I would agree with that. Although, I would agree with that as well. That Sabine is also on that track. I don't think she's going to go this far down the rabbit hole. At least, God, I hope not. But yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know where this is going, if this is going to get worse, if this is a one-off or whatever. But I definitely wanted to comment on it. I definitely wanted to put this dude on your radar. And yeah, so I think I will end it there. I don't believe that belief in atoms is anti-spiritual in any way. Again, there is no connective tissue between the idea that atoms exist, therefore God don't. I don't get it. Have I read The Time Machine? No, I have not. I tried to read The Invisible Man. I think that's also H.G. Wells, but I haven't read The Time Machine. I'm familiar with the story, but vaguely. But yeah. All right. I'm Professor Parks, and I make content on astronomy, science skepticism, or rather what I'm calling now science misinformation and mental health. If you like that sort of thing, please like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to support me and help me turn this more into a second career, please do what Conrad Kopek has done and become a member. Thank you, Conrad. I hope you're still in here. But Conrad, thank you for becoming a channel member. That definitely helps motivate me in terms of growing this channel and coming up with different techniques or different ways to get better at doing this. If you'd like to support the observatory that I work at and the work that we do at this observatory, please consider becoming a Patreon. And I should mention, speaking of the work at the observatory, that if you become a member of the channel, you will be getting member-only videos related to sort of the behind-the-scenes things that I do at the observatory, and more in-depth information about the Landolt mission that we are a part of, that we're basically doing here, assuming that it does not get cut in Trump's new budget. So, if you'd like to support me, become a channel member. If you'd like to support the observatory, please consider becoming a Patreon. All proceeds from the Patreon go back into the into improving the observatory. So, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you all for watching, particularly of those of you who've been here from the start for the last 3 hours or so. Thank you for all of those who decided to watch this on Memorex. What I am going to do later tonight is I am going to cut this up into smaller, more digestible chunks. I plan on doing that going forward with all of my live streams, because again, there are a lot of things, particularly near the end of this particular stream, that are of vital importance to talk about and to highlight. I hope you all have the good rest of your day, morning, whatever. Peace out and clear skies.